So I just find it interesting that when I make the claim that Jewish American students were physically assaulted, I'm not going to believe you. I have to go check.
I never said I don't believe you that.
Okay, when you guys do editing, make sure you find the clip and send it to me when you said, and I quote, I don't believe you. Listen to me without the phone for like 10 seconds. This is where I'm getting frustrated.
That's what we need to fact check, though.
What specifically are you fact checking here?
That Harvard University failed to protect
I am telling you as someone who was at Harvard. Why don't you just listen to me instead of going on ChatGPT? My friend,
because I don't believe you and I disagree with you. By the way, the reason I'm up here is you're the one who made false statements. So do not come at me saying that I don't know what I'm talking about. You are the one who made objectively false statements that I had to fact check. And that is what I would say it's racist to say about any specific religious group that there's not evidence that they're committing more crime, that they are committing more crime.
And I keep responding by saying objectively they are, and I keep giving examples.
But they're not. But they're not. Objectively, that's what we proved they're not.
Okay, hold on. I'm caught up in a thing. What do you mean by racist?
I think that should give us courage, exposure to other people's perspectives.
Moving us in a good direction.
Why isn't Gen Z getting laid?
Well, no pun intended. We're fucking trying. The real reason we're not getting laid is it's a manifestation of a greater societal ill. We have instant gratification with OnlyFans, with Pornhub. You don't need to have a relationship with a woman if the whole point is sexual gratification. Just do it yourself. Just go online. Just buy someone for a couple of hours. So again, the greater problem we're facing in a society is the breakdown of relationships, not just familial relationships, but also the creation of new relationships. And the people who are being affected by this the most are young men, because they are being bombarded with messages that if you don't look a certain way, no one's going to fuck you. If you don't buy this certain thing, no one's going to talk to you. And so quite literally, they buy into that system. And having a committed relationship, why? If the whole point is instant gratification, why would you need a relationship? If anything, that kind of boggles you down.
Yeah, Ricky Schlott, we had her on the show in Nashville. She's writing a book on relationships, and she talked a lot about situationships and the problems that young men face. They're basically having less sex than anyone else, except the kind of nested Pareto distribution of like the top people. Yeah. Men are having like crazy amounts, like Reed, crazy amounts of sex.
We aspire to be in that top 1%. But look, the age demographic that an app like Tinder was built for is 18 to 24-year-olds. Yeah. It's built for don't build a family, don't have a relationship, don't contribute. It's about me. And we're seeing the negative consequences of that type of environment. The demoralization of young people, I think, is one of the greatest problems that America's facing today, and almost no one's talking about it.
Oh, fascinating. Who's demoralizing Gen Z?
Well, I think it's pretty damn obvious. And I know my name is fucking Shabbos Kestenbaum.
Yeah.
So, people are going to say, go figure, this guy's going to say it. But it's true. People like Tucker Carlson, people like Nick Fuentes, who say the reason you can't get fucked, the reason you don't have a job, the reason you can't move out of your mom's basement is something the Jews. It's these shadowy, undefined forces, this conspiratorial thinking that you will literally never be able to succeed because the system, whatever that may be, is rooted out to get you. And that is a terrible, terrible message to be telling young people, that you will never be able to pull yourself up from your own bootstraps. You will never be able to have individual success because of those shadowy billionaires, because of the Jews, because of Israel. That is what is killing young people, this conspiratorial thinking. And the people who are doing it, like the Tucker Carlsons, the Nick Fuenteses, they're doing it purely for self-interest. I mean, the amount of money that has been made.
The Candace Owens, you think that
Candace Owens is making hundreds of thousands of dollars per episode on YouTube alone. She's getting donations when she does her lives on social media. I mean, this is someone who, after the death of Charlie Kirk, who supposedly was a good friend of hers, has accused everyone except Charlie for the murder. Erica Kirk was behind it. Actually, no, it was the Mossad. Actually, no, it was the Egyptians. Actually, no, it was the French. I mean, she is eluded by her own self-importance. And again, people buy into this.
So this would actually be an example.
And sorry, and let me just interrupt. And it's nothing to do with anti-Semitism. And that's where I get so frustrated, because people will look at me, they'll look at my name, they'll look at the funny hat I wear and say, oh, he just, people are waking up. It's America first, not Israel first. It has nothing to do with Israel. It has nothing to do with America. Criticize Bibi Netanyahu all you want. Criticize AIPAC all you want. I don't give a fuck. But you have to recognize that young people, Gen Z American men in particular, are being fed a diet of political indoctrination whereby all of your problems can be blamed on, again, these shadowy, undefined combined forces. So of course, young people who listen to those messages, they're not even going to try to contribute to society because it's rigged. And when I was on the far left, that was the message we were told. You know, it's the billionaires, it's the elites, whatever. But I never thought that that would be true on the right, because conservatism is all about individual responsibility. It's all about human agency. You are responsible for the choices you make in life. And for the very first time, I would say post-October 7th, we're now being bombarded with messages on the right that actually no, you can't achieve the things you want to achieve because of the tactics they're taking from the far left, because, you know, the system, because it's rigged. That's really, really dangerous.
Okay, we have so much to unpack here. So you were on the left, the far left. Did you voted for Bernie?
Twice, yeah. I voted for Bernie twice. I marched with BLM. I marched at the Supreme Court when Roe v. Wade was overturned. I was 9 years old when I knocked on doors for Barack Obama when he was running for president for the first time. I was at the 2016 Democratic Convention as a Bernie bro, booing Hillary Clinton. So I have some degree of legitimacy or validity when I say that the conservative movement, of which I will admit freely, I'm a new member of, okay? I'm not a lifelong conservative. You got me. But I will say, it is eerily similar to the patterns I saw on the far left of just blaming others for your inability to succeed in life. And now I will talk about the Jews just for a moment. Donald Trump received 35% of the Jewish vote in 2024, which doesn't sound like a heck of a lot. That is the most amount of votes from the Jews that a Republican nominee has received since Ronald Reagan. So we're talking about a heck of a lot of Jewish people who left the Democratic Party, like myself, to vote for Donald Trump. We left the Democratic Party because it catered to their radicals, to their crazies. And we don't have any other party left if not for the Republican Party. And if they fall, not only are the Jews fucked, which we are, but America is fucked. Because what is best for the conservative movement is also what's best for America, right? Limited government, individual responsibility, Judeo-Christian values. And I really do believe that, while it's true, I try not to focus on the anti-Semitism, but let's call a spade a spade. Jews are a canary in the coal mine for a much greater societal ill. And if we allow this Jew hatred and this bizarre conspiratorial thinking that the Mossad killed Charlie Kirk to poison the minds of young people, forget about they're not going to show up to vote in 2028 and onward, but they're going to drop out completely, not only from the political system in the United States, but from the system in general. That's a major, major danger.
Hey, did you know only half of you watching are subscribed? If you're enjoying the content, hit the subscribe button to keep the videos coming. Thanks.
Yeah, so I have something on my mind I'm going to ask you about, something I've been thinking about. I just wish I had bookmarked this, that I didn't bookmark it. It was one of those animated GIFs, you know, over time that they show from, and it was when Muslims move into an area, Jews move out. Have you seen that? There's that one, maybe Reed can find it over there, but talk me through it, because I'm been sincerely thinking about this now, the relationship between Islam and Judaism, between Muslims and Jews.
Yeah.
We're going to go to the Parisian slums to interview Muslims, and I was told,
Good luck.
Well, I was told, among other things, they don't go to McDonald's because they believe it's owned by Jews. They don't drink, I think Coke. They don't go to Starbucks, although there are apparently no Starbucks in the slums. But I was told, like, all these things that they believe Jews are responsible for. So, like, what is? I'm asking you a lot, but I'm kind of working out the thought in my own head. Are you concerned about Islam and being Jewish? I'm not even sure I phrased that right.
It's not about being concerned of Islam because I'm Jewish. It's about being concerned of Islam because I'm a man of the West and I believe in Western hegemony and Western civilization. So theologically, ironically, Judaism has a lot more in common with Islam than it does Christianity. So for example, under Jewish law, I as a Jew am not allowed to pray in a church. In fact, I'm not even allowed to enter a church. However, not only can I enter a mosque, I can actually pray in a mosque because Jewish law sees Islam as a monotheistic religion, whereas most rabbinic commentators see Christianity as a polytheistic religion. But that's only for Jews. Jewish law does not see Christians worshiping Jesus as polytheism, only if Jews were to engage in that act. So theologically, Jews and Muslims have a lot more in common than Jews and Christians. Historically, sociologically, culturally, that is definitely not the case. And as I say time and time again, in the 21st century, Jews and American Jews across the world have a tremendous friend, and that is American Christianity. I mean, we have no greater friend, and I'm very involved with Christian organizations, with evangelical organizations, with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So just on a pragmatic level, Jews and Christians, natural allies, and we are in this fight together against radical Islam. As it pertains to radical Islam, we're filming this just a couple days after the Bondi Beach massacre, where two Pakistani Australian men shoot and kill more than 15 Jews who are just celebrating Hanukkah on the beach, including a 10-year-old girl, Matilda. It is obvious, and Charlie Kirk was talking about this just days before he was killed, it is obvious that Islam as a political and religious philosophy is incompatible with Western civilization. It just is. That does not mean Muslims, but it does mean Islamists, and I do draw a distinction. Not all Muslims are Islamists, but every single Islamist is a Muslim. And what frustrates me so much is every time we talk about the obvious problems with Islamism and radical Islam in the West, well, not all Muslims are like that. Yeah, no shit. I mean, there are what, 2 billion Muslims? I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about the ones who want to kill us. In the same way, when I talk about a rapist or a murderer who is black, well, not all black people are rapists. Yeah, obviously, but that's irrelevant. We need to talk about the ones who are. We need to be talking about the ones who genuinely believe that if you convert out of the faith, you should be beheaded. Not only should you be, but they actually do this. Like, this is an actual thing happening in countries right now. These are people who actually believe that the most moral just cause you can be doing is beheading babies and butchering a 10-year-old girl celebrating Hanukkah on the beach. These are like actual things that are actually happening. And when you have an Islamist like Zohran Mamdani taking the reins of power in New York City, that is not bad just for the people of New York, but it sends a terrible message to the rest of the American political culture that this is now a normal, accepted, and even celebrated thing. Someone who praises the Holy Land Five, which were an unindicted co-conspirator of the funding of Hamas and other terrorist organizations. I mean, someone who, forget about calls for the Intifada, because obviously that's a call for violence, but it's so debated these days, it's not even worth getting into that debate, because let's just focus on the people he's hiring. Literally today, an hour ago, before we started this interview, he was forced to fire one of his appointees because his appointee just a couple months ago was talking about these power-hungry Jews. Zohran Mamdani is a third-world Islamist who is trying to bring his third-world culture into the United States. And that's not necessarily a problem because we've always had bad actors in American political discourse. The problem is he's elected. That's the big paradigm shift, because people like that aren't usually elected in America. And so I'm not necessarily worried about him. I am worried about the Zohran Mamdanis of the future. New York City, Democrats outnumber Republicans 8-1. Okay, so a far-left politician won. Great. But I'm more concerned about people who are trying to copy that all over the country. That's what we need to be concerned about.
So you said you didn't want to talk about, sorry to push on this, we don't have to talk about it, but I do think that there's something worth talking about globalizing the Intifada locally. Because I just did an event, and the speaker at the event was Jewish, and he said that was his concern, that the idea of globalizing Intifada will be a local phenomenon.
Yeah. So it's not that I don't want to talk about it. It's that because, again, my name is Shabbos Kestenbaum, I wear the hat. I mean, I look like I'm at a central casting from the Jewy department. My efficacy and my ability to influence or impact other people is limited because they'll just look at me and say, well, of course the Jew thinks that. So that's why, again, Charlie Kirk was such an
Nobody
unbelievable...
can accuse me of that.
Right, you're the atheist, so you can say it. But that's why Charlie Kirk was so effective, because this is someone who had zero incentive, be it political, be it familial, be it financial, incentive to care about the Jews and care about Israel, right? I mean, this guy is not connected in any measurable way. I am, so I'm limited in how impactful I can be. So never mind that, given that you brought it up anyway, what was the Intifada? Objectively speaking, leaving aside the fact that, yes, I support Israel just like I support Ukraine and Taiwan, and leaving aside the fact that I'm Jewish. Objectively speaking, the Intifada, the first Intifada in the 90s and the second Intifada in the early 2000s, was the worst periods of indiscriminate terrorism targeting Jews living in the land of Israel, brought exclusively and at the celebration of Palestinian leadership like Yasser Arafat. Yasser Arafat was offered his own state, the state of Palestine, by Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton talks about this ad nauseum. There was never a state of Palestine, by the way. It never existed. The idea that there can be a Palestinian people, how can you be a people of a country that never existed, is an exclusively political term. Before the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948, it was the British Mandate of Palestine. The word Palestine was brought by the Romans to tarnish the historical ancestral connections that Jews had to Judea. So the Romans thought to themselves, well, if we don't call the land Judea, but instead we call it Palestine, thinking of the Jewish enemy, the Philistines, then we can disconnect the Jewish attachment to the land of Israel. So I digress. Yasser Arafat was offered his own state under the Oslo Accords. Not only did he say no, he then directed Palestinians to blow up buses in Israel, to blow up nursing homes, to behead babies and children and the elderly in the streets. That is objectively what happened in the Second Intifada and to a lesser extent in the First Intifada. So this idea that, well, Intifada just means uprising, I mean, true, the Arabic translation literally does mean uprising in the same way that Sikh Heil in its German translation literally just means hail victory, but you have to be a retard, which unfortunately most of the pro-Palestinian leaderships are, most of the pro-Palestinian leadership is, to pretend that the violence is somehow disconnected from what the Intifada is, which is just a democratic struggle for peace. What a load of bullshit. Which, by the way, can you identify a single Palestinian leader in Gaza today who believes in a democratic state of Palestine, or who believes in coexistence, or who believes in two states? I can identify thousands of Israelis in government today who believe in a two-state solution. You will not be able, and I will say this to the camera, you will not be able to find one Palestinian in Hamas leadership today who believe in a two states, one for the Jews, one for the Palestinians. It doesn't exist, because I treat Palestinians like human beings. I treat them like adults. And when they say we don't want peace, we want the land from the river to the sea, I actually believe them. And it bothers me to no end that white liberals in the West don't.
Okay, so I will say that this is way out of my area, and I don't pretend to know things I don't know, so excuse me about, that's not a kind of conversation ploy, it's actually true. What does that mean, from the river to the sea? I think I know what it means. Is there a kind of an agreed upon meaning of that?
Well, if you were to ask Hamas, it's quite obvious. So Israel is one of the smallest countries, in fact, it is the smallest country in the Middle East. It's smaller than the size of New Jersey. It is between a river and a sea, the Jordanian River and the Mediterranean Sea. So when Hamas says in their charter that they want the freeing of Palestine from the river to the sea, what they are explicitly saying, and again, don't take my word for it as Shabbos Kestenbaum, the Jewy Jew, just listen to Ismail Haniyeh, listen to Yahweh Sinwar, listen to Muhammad Deif. They will tell you this explicitly. They say we want the entire land from the river to the sea, from the Mediterranean Sea to the Jordanian River. And again, this babying in the West, that when Palestinians say things, they don't actually mean that thing. No, they do mean that thing, because they are adults and they are human beings and they can make choices in life. You know, I'll give you another example. Israel offered, and the offer is still good because there's still one hostage left in Gaza. Israel has offered since October 7th, $5 million to any Gazan who will reveal the location of a single hostage. More than 250 hostages were taken. You could make a lot of good money just telling the IDF where the location of a hostage is, whether the hostage is dead or alive. Not one Gazan, not one, has decided to tell the Israel Defense Forces where a single body, living or dead, is being held, even in the face of a $5 million reward. That is an expression of Palestinians, like all human beings, using human agency. Unfortunately, they're using human agency to make really shitty decisions consistently.
Okay, so you made a distinction between Islam and Islamism.
Yeah.
And I've had people on the show push back on me when I've made that distinction. My buddy Gad Saad has tweeted about it. We've had Raymond Ibrahim on the show. We've had a few other people, both on and off camera, who have told me in no uncertain terms there is no distinction. Yeah, I don't know if you're familiar with Yasmin Mohammed.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, she wrote Unveiled, a wonderful, wonderful book. She's a tremendous, wonderful person. She's an apostate, and she's in fear for her life. Is there a distinction between Islam and Islamism? Am I wrong?
I don't, I mean, this might just be a question of semantics. To me, it's not a distinction of Islam and Islamism. It's a distinction of Muslims and Islamism. What do I mean by that? There are Muslims, let's take the UAE, that's probably the best example. There are Muslims who speak out against Islamic terrorism. The UAE really is a model of coexistence. I mean, they have built the Abrahamic Institute, which houses a mosque and a church and a synagogue. You know, they have direct relations with Israel. They believe in peace, they believe in coexistence. Those are Muslims, but they do not believe in Islamism, which is the interpretation of Sharia law, whereby we must, as a religious mandate, we must convert the unbelievers, by the sword. They don't believe in that. Unfortunately, there is a significant amount of Muslims who do in fact believe in that. So I'm not talking about those who don't, which again, the mainstream media refuses to have the conversation, and instead they say, oh, this is Islamophobic. Sure. We're not talking about everyone, but we are talking about the ones who are in actual danger to our lives. So your audience can hate Jews all you want, but since Jews came to the United States in the 1650s, before the United States was even established, up until today, so we're talking a lot of years, can you identify a single Jew who blew themselves up in the name of their religion? Right, like in a colony or on a subway or in the streets? No, because we don't do that. Can you identify a Muslim who's done that? Yeah, I can actually identify many, many Muslims. I wish that wasn't true, but it is true. And to pretend that it isn't true does a tremendous disservice, not only to actual peaceful Muslims who believe in coexistence, but an actual disservice to the American people who need to be protected by radical Islam. It's a real threat. And it bothers me to no end that instead of having these real conversations and implementing policy, we are just dumbed down in this stupid debate of, well, not all Muslims are terrorists. No one has said they are. It's a stupid distraction.
So, okay, so help me understand something. So we try to have conversations with people who believe, again, I'm an atheist, this not hiding it.
Nobody's perfect.
I never think about it. It doesn't play any role in my life at all. I just think the whole thing, no offense, is rather ridiculous. But we had a guy who was an Islamic apologist on the show. And I asked him, well, why is it that people pray in traffic in Western cities, but they don't do that in Saudi Arabia or Iran? And when Reed and I were in London, we saw them praying. I thought it was very interesting what you said about Jews not going to churches. They were praying, fully praying in the not the parking lot, but the space right outside the church, the little grass strip. I don't know, it probably has a name.
Because it's not about conviction, it's about control. This is where Islamism comes into play. There's a reason, to your point, that they're not praying in the streets in Muslim countries. They're praying in the streets in Western countries because their goal, and again, don't take my word for it, listen to the imams themselves in Dearborn, Michigan. The goal is to Islamify the United States of America. It is a tremendous problem. And again, do all Muslims believe in this? No, but a lot of them do. And that is an issue we have to confront. There is a genuine desire amongst a significant amount of Muslim Americans in the United States not to assimilate, not to believe in democratic norms, not to believe in the virtues of Western hegemony or Western civilization, but to dominate the West, which is why in Dearborn, Michigan, the congressional district that Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib represents, last summer there were literal calls while she was doing a press conference of death to America. We had never experienced that before in the United States because we're not like Europe. We haven't fallen. We don't import radical migrants. But it seems like that there is a growing problem. How can it be that you have an individual living in America saying death to America? And again, don't take my word for it. Go on YouTube right now and just search Dearborn, Michigan, death to America. You can hear the audio and watch the American Muslim protesters yourself calling for those things in the streets.
So, okay, so this is...
And can I make one last point?
Go
so again,
for it.
Hate Jews all you want. Jews love America. We love being in this country. I was just in D.C. a few days ago.
I hope you're not saying I hate Jews.
So, no, no, God forbid.
Okay.
I'm just saying, for those who hate Jews, you have to recognize reality. We love this country. I was in D.C. a few days ago, and I took a friend of mine to the Lincoln Memorial, and I literally teared up when I was explaining the Emancipation Proclamation. Yeah. This is such a wonderful, beautiful country. As I said, Jews have been here since before the establishment of the United States of America. Whether it's politics, whether it's media, whether it's business, whether it's sports, we have contributed. We have developed vaccines. Like, we love this country. We say blessings for this country each and every single day. You will not find a single American Jew living in the United States burning an American flag. It's not even in our psyche. It's not even like in our conceptual framework. But that is objectively not the case with a significant amount of Muslim Americans living in this country who do not believe in all of the things that we Jews believe in.
Okay, so I have a friend in New York, as I told you off camera. I know almost no Orthodox Jews. I have a lot of Jewish friends, and they're all secular or atheist.
Yeah.
But Reed and I have a friend in New York. The one we had dinner with. I'm not going to mention her name on the show. And she was telling me at her apartment, she was very friendly with this guy who was not Muslim. She was hanging out with him, and not romantically, but they were just friendly.
Okay.
And he started listening to Nick Fuentes, and now. Not only does he not talk to her, but he's actually rude to her.
Well, I think that goes back to what we were discussing earlier, the demoralization of American society, because it's so much easier to shut off your ability to think critically about issues, and it's much easier to simply say, it's not my fault, it's the Jews, or it's not my fault, it's the billionaires. And again, this used to be a hallmark of the far left. But the problem is it's now metastasized into the conservative movement as well. And just because you mentioned Nick Fuentes explicitly, I do want to mention, I feel like I'm on fucking crazy pills. Because yes, I was a Democrat. Yes, I was on the far left. Yes, I did Bernie and all that stuff. But then I campaigned for Donald Trump, and I spoke at the Republican convention. I spoke at Trump rallies, and I registered hundreds of voters. And we got him elected, and I've been to the White House numerous times to talk about issues that I care about. Nick Fuentes, in 2024, during the height of the election, told his Groyper audience, or threatened his Groyper audience, that he was going to go to Dearborn, Michigan, and he was going to register Muslim voters to vote for Kamala Harris. And he already threatened J.D. Vance that in 2028 he's going to do the exact same thing. This is a guy who went on Tucker Carlson's show and said that he fawns over Joseph Stalin. He remembers the date December 18th, which happens to be today, because that's Joseph Stalin's birthday. And Tucker says, oh, interesting, we'll get back to it. Of course, he never did. He's not a conservative. Like, am I fucking crazy here? Like, okay, you don't think I'm a conservative because I used to be a liberal. Okay, fine, it's legitimate. I was a liberal, now I'm not. You know who else did that? Ronald Reagan, or more immediately, Donald Trump. But sure, you can criticize me. Nick Fuentes is objectively not a conservative. He does not believe in, like, the market economy. Okay? He does not believe in strong national defense. He does not believe in Judeo-Christian values. On his podcast last week, he literally said that American men who want to get married and start a family are gay.
I remember that.
What is happening? Why is this considered someone that we need to be defending? Why is it that, what's his name, Kevin Roberts of the Heritage Foundation is saying that if we don't platform Nick Fuentes, then we're ceding territory to these nefarious globalist outside actors who want to cancel free speech? No. Refusing to engage with individuals who believe that we should rape women whom we disagree with, who believe that we should deport all Mexicans, that Jews should be headed to the concentration camps. Refusing to engage with those people is not engaging in cancel culture, it's engaging in common sense. And every person on planet Earth used to know this. In the same way that Turning Point USA or the Heritage Foundation or PragerU will not amplify someone who believes in the genital mutilation of young children in the name of gender-affirming care, they would not platform those people because we don't believe in that thing, and that's not a conservative principle. But all of a sudden, when it comes to like the dumbest people on Twitter, Nick, Candace, Tucker, oh no, we have to platform them because if we don't, we see
too.
Oh, Andrew Tate, which again, I feel like I'm on fucking crazy pills. Tucker Carlson gives a fawning interview with Andrew Tate. He flies to fucking Romania to interview the guy. This is a guy who has trafficked young women. He is accused of raping women. He's made millions of dollars having a cam service where people can pay to watch live girls on camera. Meanwhile, Ben Shapiro wrote about the dangers of pornography 20 fucking years ago. He literally wrote a book on it. And Tucker Carlson has the audacity, has the temerity to fawn over Andrew Tate while at the same time criticizing Ben Shapiro as some, nefarious globalist? What in the hell is happening?
Well, what is happening?
The dumbing down of our society. The dumbing down of our society, the demoralization of our society. And again, it's so easy for people who are going to watch our interview, because this is what happens with social media. They're going to take a 30-second clip of what I say out of context, and they're just going to say that all I care about is Israel, or all I care about is the Jews, all I care about is combating anti-Semitism. Forget about the Jews and forget about anti-Semitism. This is a tremendous 5-alarm fire for Western civilization, that young people are increasingly opting out of the system because they believe that it truly is rigged and they will never be able to get ahead in life. And there are nefarious actors who know that young people believe this, and they're making a shitload of money peddling this lie. And it's this like self-serving ecosystem, because the more you get paid to do it, the more you're going to do it. And the more you do it, the more people are going to listen and give you money. It is so wildly destructive, and it bothers me to no end that people don't see this. How do people not? Why does it take, whatever?
No, but this is important. So what do you say to the people who say Western civilization isn't worth preserving? It's racist and patriarchal and...
Well, that's coming from the left. They'll say it's not worth preserving because it's race and patriarchy. And my response to that is, I just did a Jubilee debate, is okay, so leave. I mean, I had a conversation with Scott Jennings on my show at PragerU.
A lot of people can't leave. I mean, their families are here.
It's funny you say that. That's always the excuse. Oh, my abuela lives here. I mean, that's such bullshit. If you really believe that this was like this racist, patriarchal system that only rewards rich old white men, then you really would leave, and you would find ways to do it. Jews in Poland or in Hungary or Czechoslovakia in the 1930s, those who could leave did. And they didn't say, oh, but if they were able to leave, they would get out, because they truly saw that their societies were failing. If you truly felt that American society was this evil, globalist, colonialist entity, then you would leave. They don't actually believe it. But what I would say is, specifically to your point, the whole it's racist, it's patriarchal, that used to come from the left. The right isn't saying it's racist and patriarchal, they're just saying it's stacked against you. But they're not actually defining what that is. They're not defining what the rigging is. Again, Tucker Carlson is a perfect example of it. Tucker Carlson will not say the word Donald Trump because he doesn't have the balls to do it. What he will say is that the current federal government is covering up a child sex ring between globalist billionaires, the Mossad, and Jeffrey Epstein. But he won't say Donald Trump's name. But he will say every single day that it's like an actual thing that's happening. I mean, Ben Shapiro has this point. Just say the thing. Stop talking about these shadowy, undefined forces and actually say it. Have the courage to say the thing. But they
Musk
don't
said
have
the thing. Do you remember that when he tweeted out?
Right.
What was it? It was actually the reason.
He said the reason that Donald Trump has not released the Epstein files is because Donald Trump is in the Epstein files.
Right.
Which it is true Donald Trump is in the Epstein files, but what is not true is he's in the Epstein files because he was raping children.
Yeah.
And if he was raping children, the Democrats who had the ability to release the Epstein files for 4 years would have released it on day one of Joe Biden's inauguration.
Yeah, I'm glad you used the word raping because that's what it is.
That's what it is.
Let's not pussyfoot around.
Exactly. Just say the thing.
Yeah, just
and
say
they don't.
the thing. So back to Islamic immigration.
Yes.
Are you?
Wow, very optimistic conversation we're having.
Well, if you only knew. So, are you? What are your thoughts on two things? Do you think Western Europe is in hospice, and specifically, I say Western Europe as opposed to Europe? And then I want to turn the conversation about Islamic immigration toward the United States. Do you think Western Europe is in trouble?
Oh yeah, I think we're past the point if it's in trouble. So full disclosure, my whole family's British. I'm half British. My whole family still lives there, except for my dad and mom who left about 30 years ago to come to the United States to chase the American dream, but everyone else is still in London. London has fallen. And again, I don't mean anti-Semitism. Sadiq Khan, for example, he's the mayor of London. He's a Muslim, of course. He had the Christmas tree lighting a couple of weeks ago.
Right.
It was the most pathetic thing you've ever seen, and they didn't even call it a Christmas tree lighting. It's, I think they said it was a holiday lighting or a season's greeting, and it's this little shrub with a couple of light bulbs on it. The United Kingdom used to be the global superpower. They willingly and deliberately imported individuals and groups who abhor the values of the West, and they're paying the price for it. And again, I don't just mean the United Kingdom. We're talking about Sweden, which is now the rape capital of Europe, and it's almost exclusively by Muslims from third world countries. Again, this is not Islamophobic. This is just objective data that the reason that Sweden is now the rape capital, coincidentally, over the last 20 years, is because for the last 20 years, they've imported these types of people who have cultural clashes. We're seeing this in France, and we're also seeing this in Canada, but that's a different story. I go to Canada quite often. I always tell young people when I speak on the college campuses, I said, you should really think about leaving this country. Why stay in a country that does not like you? Go to the United States. We're an incredible country, and thank God we have a president who, you can hate his tariff policies, you can hate his policies on Ukraine, but at least this is someone who recognizes that Western hegemony and American military dominance must be preserved. He has effectively shut down our border, and he is not interested in being the world's dumping ground for, the problems in the Middle East. He's not interested in importing Syrian migrants or migrants from Gaza.
Okay, hold on. I don't want to go to the
Sorry.
U.S. No, I don't want to. I want to stay in Western Europe.
Yeah.
So.
They've lost their identity. That's essentially the argument here. They've lost their identity. What does it mean to be British? If you were to ask most young Brits, they wouldn't really be able to tell you.
Yeah, I think it was, I saw a video of Boris Johnson talking about if you want to fight in Ukraine, and I know that the Poles have made conscription is mandatory service now, and I know, but who's going to fight in those?
Right. And by the way, I know you mentioned Western Europe, but I just want to give a shout out to Central and Eastern Europe. Ukraine, Poland, Hungary, the Czech Republic, these are rock solid countries who are very proud of their traditions, who are very proud of their culture, and they defend it. Poland is the only country in Europe that has not had a single Islamist terrorist attack. And that is a direct result.
They just foiled one.
In Poland?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well, thank God they foiled it. But from the years, I might be making this up a little bit, let's say 2017 to 2021, it might be 2016 to 2020, I don't remember the exact years, there were more British Muslims who served in ISIS than served in the United Kingdom.
Correct.
That is one of the scariest statistics, not just for the United Kingdom, but for all of Europe to contend with. That is a major problem, and it's entirely self-induced. You did this to yourself. You did not have to do this, but you did it. And you still don't have to do it. Like, you can deport people. Remigration is like an actual thing, but they refuse to do it.
Yeah. So you're a guy, it seems like I don't have to worry about offending. So I'm just going to
Go for it.
I'm just going to say it. What is your response to the argument, when you mentioned Sweden or Malmo or in the grooming gangs, et cetera? What is your response to the argument that they wanted to do this to themselves?
How does that offend me? That doesn't offend me.
Well,
I probably agree with that.
It is. Well, it's an inherently come on, we didn't want to import people. We
Angela Merkel very much did. She imported, 4 million Syrian migrants in the span of 8 years?
Yeah.
They did want to do this. And again, it is because of the lack of patriotism and cultural affiliation with their own people.
But it's not, my point though is it's not ignorant. It's not like,
Correct.
we would think.
Correct. There was actually, I just did an episode on this at PragerU. There was a Scandinavian airline, and its name is escaping me. And they did a Christmas advert a few years ago. And the whole point of the advert, it generated millions of views, is they said, what's unique about Scandinavia? Nothing. Because actually the best of Scandinavia, we just import it from other places. Our democracy comes from the Greeks, and our love of food comes from the French, and there's actually nothing inherently good about us because we just import it from other, like, holy shit. And again, people knew what they were doing when they were creating this ad. They actually thought this is a winning message. So if you're a young Scandinavian and you have seen that your hometown is now 60% Muslims who can't even speak your own language, and you're being bombarded with advertisements and a culture of consumerism, that there's actually nothing unique about the place you live, then to your point, of course I'm not going to defend it. Not only will I not defend it, why would I even live here? Because to your own point, there's nothing unique about us. And that's why America is so exceptional. We believe in American exceptionalism. No, we actually are unique. We have something to give to the world.
I'm sorry, I don't want to go to America yet.
Okay.
I promise you I'll go to America.
Sorry.
I promise. So, that was the idea of, what is unique about Scandinavia? Absolutely nothing. So back to that point, like, if you really didn't want it, then you'd stop it.
Correct.
Okay, well, you agree.
Ergo,
you want it.
Right, ergo, they want it, and they aren't stopping it.
Right.
It's cultural suicide.
Yeah.
I mean, Gaza talks about this the whole time. He talks about the suicidal empathy. We have to be so empathetic and so politically correct and so in love with diversity and equity and tolerance that even when, again, let's go back to the UK, even when Muslim migrants are quite literally raping young white women in our streets, we can't say anything because there's a fear of being called Islamophobic. That again, this isn't me being a bigot towards Muslims. This is me talking about actual things that happened. That local city councilors in local districts across Great Britain knew that there was a tremendous problem with migrants from third world countries being unable to assimilate into Western culture, and they groom young British women, mostly Christian, and then they end up raping them. And local districts, local police officers knew about it, but because they were predominantly Pakistani men, they didn't want to say anything. That is insane. That is the definition of suicidal empathy.
Yeah, I had Shermer on the show just yesterday, and I told him my mind was blown, like just completely blown away when I watched the Bill Maher interview with Patton Oswalt, and he had never even heard of grooming gangs. And yet he's advocating, and it just completely blew my mind.
Well, one of the things that I now get a lot of satisfaction over now that I've left the left is watching these videos on YouTube. If you'll have a right-wing troll, he'll show up to one of those anti-ICE, pro-illegal immigration rallies, and he'll say, hey, can you sign a petition saying that you want more of these migrants into your countries? And we'll have to say, yes, of course, yeah.
Would you go into my house?
Exactly. How many can you house? What do you mean? Yeah, how many can you bring into your home? Oh, I don't
have enough room, they say.
Exactly. So again, it underscores that no one actually wants this, but it's the virtue signaling, it's this fear of being called Islamophobic or bigoted or whatever.
Yeah.
And again, we're seeing real world practical consequences of this, which again, love Donald Trump, hate Donald Trump. The erasure of political correctness in the American political landscape is one of the greatest achievements of his administration.
So now I'm going to go to America.
Sorry, I kept bringing it up.
Yeah, no, that's fine. But I was going to ask you, what do you think do you think, okay, I'm not going to, I lied. Last question on Western Europe, and then I promise you I'm going to go. And I love Hungary. We go there to 2 or 3 months a year. Every year we've gone there.
Hungary, Poland, the Czech Republic, and Ukraine.
I can't speak. Ukraine is having some issues now. Do you think there is a solution for Western Europe, or is it too late? And then I will go to America.
Is it too late is an interesting question. I don't think I have the intellectual capacity to answer that. I don't know. What I will say is there definitely are solutions. Mass deportations.
Never going to happen.
Is there a political will for it? Absolutely not. But I definitely see if Nigel Farage of the Reform Party wins, which all polling data support data that he would win.
Today he would win, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, by overwhelming margins. And in fact, the Labour Party would diminish itself to like 4 seats, according to a latest Channel 12 survey. In theory, this is someone who does talk about mass deportations. This is someone who talks about, saving the culture and the identity of the United Kingdom. In theory, it could happen. But again, is it too late? That's a much better question that I will leave to the experts, which I am not to answer. Okay. I don't know, but I will say I'm very sad. I know that sounds a bit pathetic, but it saddens me as someone who, again, has British ancestry. Yeah. It saddens me when I visit my family in London, and this is not.
Well, I'll just give you my opinion, then we'll talk about America. I think it's too late. I think they're utterly fucked, and I think the first principle that we ought to invoke is you have to be honest about the nature of the problem. Nobody is being honest about the nature of the problem, so you get what you deserve. Now, America, as promised.
Yes.
Is Islamic immigration a problem in America, in your opinion?
Okay, great question. So thank God for Donald Trump, right? This is someone who just 2 days ago saying he's going to have a full embargo, a full travel ban on anyone coming from quote-unquote Palestine, which is the West Bank and Gaza. This is someone who currently has a travel ban on 19 countries. Right. It's not Muslim countries, but it's countries with no vetting procedures, countries with tremendous problems with terrorism. They happen to be Muslim countries, but it's not a Muslim ban, it's a terrorism ban. We do not have the same levels of Islamic migration into the United States, and that is a direct result of what I just said, strong immigration laws, strong vetting procedures. What we do have is a growing domestic extremism problem of the Muslims who are already here, particularly in Dearborn, Michigan, or in Paterson, New Jersey. There is this lack of affinity or willingness to assimilate into American culture, to accept Western values, and their birth rate far outweighs the birth rate of your community of white atheists, white secular, predominantly liberal people.
It's my community. We a bunch of white. We all.
I'm just saying,
the
you guys
same,
really are not. You don't have a lot of kids. I mean, we Jews, again, love us or hate us, but I'm one of 7 siblings, and that's actually fairly typical for my Orthodox community. So if you want to defend Western civilization, you would give Jews and Christians, people who produce lots of babies, you would give us as many tax credits as you can so we can repopulate.
What should they do in Hungary?
Exactly. It's exactly what they do in Hungary. They also do it in Russia, but that's for more nefarious reasons, but I digress. So we have a problem of domestic extremism from Muslim communities. And yes, there is a growing problem. It's not nearly the same extent in Western Europe, but there is a growing problem of taking people, especially under the Biden administration, taking people from Middle Eastern countries, predominantly Muslim countries, who don't speak English, who have no desire to speak English, who have no desire to contribute to the economy, who have no desire to assimilate into American or Western culture. It is a growing problem. Now, I will sound a little bigoted, although it's not my idea. There was a minister in India who gave an interview with Vice. This is years ago, and it was very infamous because he essentially said, anytime a country has 25 to 30% Muslim refugees, that's how you know the country is on a social decline. And the Vice interview was very taken aback because, again, she's this white liberal woman. She says, well, that's incredibly Islamophobic. He says, I don't care what it is, it's the truth. And again, this is like an Indian minister in Modi's government, and he's saying you have to limit, it's not Muslim migration, but you have to limit Islamist migration. People who, again, don't share your values. And whether your name is Mahmoud Khalil, who is the student agitator at Columbia University, or whether your name is, Jewy Goldstein, it's irrelevant what your, it's irrelevant.
That's an unfortunate name.
Yeah, well, I'm pretty close. But regardless of your faith, it's kind of irrelevant. What matters is, do you want to contribute to American democracy? And if the answer is no, irrespective of your national origin, irrespective of your religion, do not come into this country, and we cannot allow those people into this country, which is why I was so fed up with the Biden administration, who insisted we must take people who do not believe in our way of life. And so Mahmoud Khalil in September had a federal district judge say that he's eligible for deportation either to Algeria or Syria, which actually is his home. He's not an American, but he's out pending some type of appeal. I'm very, very confident he will be deported, but let's assume, for argument's sake, he isn't deported.
Yes.
The judge says, no, you have to keep him here. That is the suicidal empathy that I see in Western Europe, of unelected judges saying that we must keep people who hate our country in our country. If that becomes the norm, if that becomes the celebrated culture of American politics, then yes, that will spell the downfall of the United States.
But then we deserve it.
Absolutely, which is why I am very cognizant of the fact that people who pretend to be conservative, people who pretend to be on the right, like Nick Fuentes or Tucker Carlson, they're not just destroying the conservative movement, they are destroying the future of the United States. Because we say this all the time at PragerU. What is best for the conservative movement is also what's best for America. And if we lose at the ballot box in 2026 or 2028 to people who believe in globalism, who believe in the unlimited importation of migrants who don't share our values, then America's at a dangerous inflection point. So that's why I believe so strongly in denouncing these figures, because they're not just hurting, a small echo chamber on Twitter. They're not just mean to the Jews. I mean, who cares? They will destroy 250 years of Western hegemony and American military dominance, not only here, but across the world.
Who do you think is more of a threat to the West? Do you think it's the far left or the far right?
I've been asked that a couple of times. It's a good question. Look, they're both threats, so at the end of the day, who cares? Because my enemy to the left is also my enemy to the right. At the present, though, the far greater enemy is the far right, simply because they're in power. Or I shouldn't say they're in power, they are in proximity to power. It's very dangerous that, for example, J.D. Vance, just 2 or 3 days after Charlie Kirk was killed, is hosting Charlie's show, and he says, for my first guest, here's Tucker Carlson. That's really dangerous. The far left doesn't have that access to power, at the moment at least. But again, the pendulum will swing. Well, the Republicans are shooting themselves in the foot, and they will probably lose the midterms in 2026. And honestly, you can, bookmark this for later. At this point in time, if the J.D. Vance of 2025 is the J.D. Vance in 2028, the Republican presidential nominee, I mean, I wouldn't vote for him, but I'm certainly convinced he would lose, and I would be certainly convinced that the Republican Party would deserve to lose if they nominate the J.D. Vance of today. Again, he could change, but
Yeah. What would your advice to J.D. Vance be?
grow some fucking balls. Call them out. Stop trying to do this both sides of, you're winking to the Groypers online while at the same time telling mainstream conservatives that this is an illness. No. You have to be willing to call them out. Ben Shapiro made this point yesterday at Heritage. He said, a country is not a country if it doesn't have borders, right? Well, a movement is not a movement if it does not have ideological borders. The conservative movement is certainly an open tent. They accept a lot of people's. They do not and cannot and should not accept all ideas. There are some really bad ideas being brought up in the conservative movement right now. They are a cancer, and they must be eradicated. Not the people, but
Excised.
the ideas must be excised, eradicated immediately.
It's the
And
no
J.D.
enemies
Vance,
to the right.
Exactly. And J.D. Vance knows what those enemies are because he's a smart guy, but he's also very politically calculated, and he does not want to call them out. And that's a tremendous danger.
What would this is a much more difficult question. What would your advice to those on the left be?
The same thing, but they won't do it. Get rid of your... Okay, I left the left because they surrendered, they acquiesced, and they placated to the most radical, extreme fringe of the party. They did. And, I mean, Kathy Hochul endorsing Zohran Mamdani will be a watershed moment in American political history. That's why I left. And the Republican Party, as I mentioned, in danger of doing the same thing. So they have to do the same thing, but they don't. They have no leadership. The number one, there was a Politico report about a month ago, and it asked Democrats, who is your number one choice for the 2028 Democratic primary? And the number one response was, I don't know. Number two response was Kamala Harris, which I think underscores the first answer of I don't know. But they have no leadership. They don't know what their party is. And the Republican Party, I believe, will be doing the exact same thing the Democrats are doing now in 2028, unless they change course very, very quickly.
Okay, so you moved from, and we can talk about the wisdom of this decision off camera. You moved from New York City to L.A. Mamdani has come up a few times in the conversation, and I'm a big believer in putting your money where your mouth is, and not telling anybody you're smart, making predictions and betting on what you believe. What do you think is going to happen? Can you make some predictions about what you think is going to happen? If you don't want to, if you're uncomfortable
well,
with that,
I can make a prediction with Mamdani. It's easier simply because he was born in Uganda, so he's ineligible to run for president of the United States, which again, when the Democratic Party keeps saying Mamdani is the future of our party, what does that actually mean? Do you mean literally Mamdani? Because that's objectively not true. And if you mean like people like Mamdani, well, that's a very weird argument to make because New York City, outside of San Francisco and parts of LA, is the most far left city in the United States. And he didn't even win that big of a majority. He certainly won a majority, and I'm not discounting that. But it's not like he has a massive mandate. I mean, he got 51% of the vote, 52% of the vote, in a city where Democrats outnumber Republicans 8-1. So the Democrats are doing, I believe, a tremendous mistake in saying, oh, this must be the future of the party. The future of the party is to talk about affordability. I actually think that the media is overhyping how much Mamdani actually spoke about affordability. I believe a lot of Mamdani's success was in large part due to October 7th and just the rage and anger that so many Democrats had against Israel and the Jews. I mean, Mamdani was arrested a week after October 7th of 2023 because he was protesting in the street saying globalize the Intifada and stop the genocide. So I truly believe if there was no October 7th, there would be no Zohran Mamdani. He was polling at like 1 or 2%. And then he started talking about Palestine, which again, it's such gaslighting. I was on Piers Morgan's show about a month ago, and Annika Sparin of the Young Turks says, Mamdani won because he doesn't care about Israel and just focused about affordability. And I said, what a load of shit. This is a guy who addressed the Democratic Socialists of America Convention in 2023 and literally said, and I quote, Palestine is the center of my political identity. This is someone who on his primary election victory party was blasting Palestinian music and everyone was dancing the Palestinian dance. I think it's called the Jabka or the Dapka or whatever it's called. All of his supporters are wearing keffiyehs. They talk about Israel incessantly. They insist they're going to arrest the democratically elected leader of a sovereign country, Benjamin Netanyahu, which he has zero authority to do. Why does he talk about those things? Because that's what the base cares about. In the same reason that you have, I won't mention his name because I don't want to give him any credit, but you have someone running for the governorship in Florida. And he talks about, I'm not going to take a single penny of AIPAC money. Bitch, AIPAC doesn't even give money to state elections. It's only federal. They don't want to give you money anyway. But again, it's like virtue signaling to the base. Israel controls everyone except me. Israel doesn't care about you. Israel doesn't know who you are.
Are most of your friends Jewish or atheist or Christian or Muslim?
All the above.
Everybody.
Yeah. Not as many Muslim friends, but I do have some. Actually, my latest episode I keep plugging PragerU, but it happens to be my latest episode was with a Qatari dissident, Khalid al-Hayl, who is the Qatari opposition leader. And again, he's not an Islamist, he's a Muslim, and he calls out the Muslim Brotherhood, he calls out the Qatari regime, he calls out Hamas and Hezbollah. So, going back to, there's a distinction between the two. But yeah, I have friends from all of the religions. The religion I'm actually most fascinated with, and I think that Jews actually have the most in common, is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, otherwise known as the Mormons.
Really?
We have a similar history of the origins of our people being that of oppression and persecution, having to flee to find a new promised land. Yeah, there's actually a lot both in our history and our theology that is quite complementary. So I'm actually working on bringing young Mormons to the land of Israel, not for any political agenda. They can hate Bibi all they want, hate AIPAC all you want, but I think it's super important for Mormons and really people of all faith, go to the homeland where Jesus walked. Like, you should be way more into your Christianity than you currently are. One of the best outcomes, again, of the Trump presidency, and this is also influenced by Charlie Kirk and his brutal assassination, is Gen Z is actually more religious than their parents. That has never been the case in the last 100 years of American religious life. It has always been, and you as the atheist can attest to this, it has always been the younger you get. You're the spokesman, congratulations. But the younger you get, the less likely you are to be attracted to religious institutions or to a church or have any sort of membership or affinity. And Gen Z is actually bucking that trend, and that's a really, really good thing. And I have always said, as a Jewish person, America would be a much better country if we want to reverse those societal ills of Gen Z, not having relationships and the conspiratorial thinking. Christians should go to church and go to church way more than they currently are. Not only should you read the New Testament, you should live a life in accordance of the teachings of Jesus Christ. And yes, absolutely, go to the land of Israel. And again, hate the state of Israel as much as you want, but you should absolutely get baptized where John the Baptist was baptized. You should absolutely walk the Via Dolorosa in the old city of Jerusalem, go to Har Megiddo, do all of those things, connect with your religion. Why wouldn't you? And again, this is where I get upset because nefarious actors might watch this interview and take 10 seconds of what I'm about to say and clip it. But they're going to do it anyway. So the full point is, I am Jewish, obviously, and I therefore base my political identity, I base my ideology, I base my relationships around my Judaism. I am Jewish first, and everything else is a reflection of that Judaism. And this is where they cut me off, but the point I'm saying is Christians should do the exact same thing. And by the way, atheists should do the exact same thing. Base your religion, base your identity, base your politics off of your religion. Base your most sacred divine beliefs, use those sacred divine beliefs, and then say, what would God want for me to do? How would he want me to vote? What are the relationships he would want me to have? And America would be so much better if more people connected to their religion. And I know you're an atheist, so I will add, I grew up in Teaneck, New Jersey, and there was a humanist society even in Riverdale, there's a humanist society a couple of blocks from where I live. If you're an atheist, go to a humanist society. And yeah, you should actually donate hospitals because they should not all be called St. Joseph's and Maimonides. They should be called the Richard Dawkins Hospital. Go do that. That would be a really good thing. Do it. Unfortunately, they don't, but that's a different conversation.
Yeah, so just as an aside, my atheism plays no role in my life whatsoever. Like, I never think, today I woke up, there's no God. Let's celebrate yet another day.
Well, what I mean by atheism is there was a Hasidic master known as the Alexander Rebbe, and he was once asked by a Hasid of his, does God create everything for a purpose? He says, yes, of course. And he says, to try to trip up the Rebbe, okay, what's the purpose of atheists? What do they do? And the Alexander Rebbe said, well, atheists are one of the most important people in society because an atheist looks at a problem and he says, no one else is going to come help. I'm the only one who can do it.
Oh,
so he said every Jew needs to have a little bit of atheism inside of them.
Interesting.
Don't just rely on the miracles. Don't just rely on the prayers. Do them as well. They could happen, but also recognize I am the one who is in charge of this. Maimonides talks about this. Maimonides says that every single Jewish person should view the world as like 50% good and 50% bad. And you, as an individual, you and only you have the power to actually tip the scales if you do acts of goodness. So that's what I mean by atheism. Go to a humanist society and talk about like values and virtues. Now, where do you base those values and virtues from? That's a conversation for another time, so I'm not entirely sure.
Right.
But yeah, absolutely, like have soup kitchens, have humanitarian centers, build hospitals.
Yeah, okay. If you were given the ear of Trump for literally 5 minutes, you and him just like this, what would you say you have 5 minutes?
Oh man, this is totally not related to our conversation, but I would tell him that climate change is real but that's a different conversation.
Okay.
In terms of our conversation, I would tell him that remigration should be an absolute priority. The deportation of as many illegal immigrants should be an absolute priority. He should speak forcefully against those both on the left and on the right, who are trying to brainwash the minds of young people, telling them that you can't get ahead, you can't have a job, you can't have sex, you can't have a relationship because something the Jews, something the billionaire, something Israel. No. You have to reinforce the importance that America is built upon personal responsibility and making something of yourself. It is a land of opportunity, which does not always guarantee outcome, but it does guarantee that you have the ability to make something of yourself. It may not always be easy, it may not always be simple, but you can in fact do it. That's what brought my parents to the United States 30 years ago, the availability of opportunity.
Okay, so here's
that's what I would tell President Trump. Just reinforce those messages. There are also policies I would like to see passed. Defund Harvard University permanently. Criminalize diversity, equity, and inclusion permanently. Give Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine permanently. But those are more policy. Right.
Yeah, we agree on
there
all
you go.
of those.
So those are more
that's
policy
interesting.
prescriptions. But in terms of this ideological and spiritual battle, it is the battle for the soul of America. And unfortunately, I think we're losing.
Okay, now this is a much more difficult question.
Okay.
You have 5 minutes with Macron.
Oh God, resign. That's what I would tell him. Flee. Where do I even begin? I think I would spend the first 4 minutes and 30 seconds just
Asking
yelling
him
at
if his
him.
wife has a penis.
Right.
Sorry.
Yes. But that also underscores why is Candace Owens considered a serious person? And
I know.
not only that,
I
let's say
know.
Brigitte Macron is a man, which she isn't, but let's just say she's a biological
kids
male.
from previous marriage.
Yeah, right. So let's say, for the sake of argument, that the First Lady of France is a man. Who in the hell cares? And why are you spending literally millions of dollars? She said on her program she needs like $5 million to wage this lawsuit. Why is this the hill that you're going to die on? It is so goddamn weird. Even if you're right, it's so weird.
I know. I don't know, because I've often wondered why so many people tune into these platforms, because Candace Owens is clearly insane. I mean, she's clearly crazy. Okay,
because it's much easier to shut off critical thinking than to actually think critically about issues and to have complexity in life. Why have complexity and toil and tribulation when you can just listen to a Candace Owens saying everything is fucked, but I'm the only one who has the answers?
Yeah.
Not only is Brigitte Macron a man, but also the Mossad killed Charlie Kirk and donate $500 to my platform, and I'll lead you through this. It's insanity. In terms of what I would tell Emmanuel Macron,
5 minutes.
I would say France does
Tell me like I'm Macron.
France does have so much to be celebrated and lauded for. It is a bastion of culture and Western civilization. And
Inspector Clouseau is from there.
Exactly. The Pink Panther with Steve Martin is one of my favorite childhood movies. And you have surrendered that for a very unclear purpose. Why is it that you're doing this to yourself? Why? I just can't understand for the life of me. Why are you importing all of these people who hate you, who hate your citizens and the people you were elected to represent, who hate French culture, who throw cans of tomato soup at the Mona Lisa? Why are you bringing these people in? Why is it that France is one of the leading countries of Islamist terrorist attacks? Why is it that during your Christmas parades and your Christmas markets, you now have to have 50-foot concrete barriers because a radical Muslim is going to drive his truck onto, this literally happened in Nice a couple years ago in France over Christmas. They're going to drive their trucks onto French citizens. Why are you doing this?
So I'm going to be Macron. We're going to role play.
Okay.
But I'm not going to do the French accent.
Okay.
This is a very small number of people, under 10%.
First of all, 10% is not a small part of the population at all. So quantitatively, even if I wanted to concede the argument that it is a small population, qualitatively look at the destruction that those 10%, not all of them, but a significant amount are doing. If you look at the major terrorist attacks that happened in France in the last 10 years, almost all of them were committed by radical Muslims. You have a responsibility to protect the people who elected you, first and foremost. You do not have the responsibility to import people who don't share your values. And the problem with France is it's compounded, because it's not just people you imported from third world countries. We actually just had Jesse Padilla, who wrote this book, If It Takes 1,000 Years. He was embedded, speaking with Al-Qaeda commanders and Taliban commanders, and he actually writes in his book that in France, one of the problems they have now is young people, young Muslims, are more extreme than their parents. And these are young Muslims who were born in France. And that's because they don't see themselves as part of the culture and history of France. They don't see themselves as the continuation of Western civilization. They see themselves as outcasts, as people who don't want to assimilate. And then again, not all, not even the majority, but a significant amount are being radicalized in their mosques to carry out terrorist attacks in France. This isn't me talking as a conspiratorial theorist. This is not me talking as a conservative.
Or a Jew.
This is me just looking at data and numbers. It is insanity that in Paris you have to have, as we mentioned, concrete barriers to prevent trucks driven by radical Muslims driving down the people that you are elected to protect. That is suicidal empathy, and that is an abdication of both moral and political responsibility.
Okay, a couple more things. We're gonna do something unusual here.
Okay.
So we have a cameraman here who I think broadly would probably be the most charitable way to say it, disagrees with everything I think. So we're gonna give him a chance to ask questions in a
Please.
minute. And is you fine with that?
Please, as many questions as you want.
So I want to ask a few questions first. So we've covered a lot of ground on specific topics. And obviously, the interview is only an hour or a half or what have you. But is there anything I should have asked you that I didn't ask you? Or anything you really want to add or you want to say?
Oh, I've never been asked that before. I would say this. I'm single, although I'm working on it. But in the Jewish faith and in the American Jewish community, we are taught from a very early age the importance of having a family, getting married, raising kids, and when you raise those kids, teach them certain values, certain ethics rooted in biblical values. And America is losing the aspects that made it so great and so unique. America is a country that was built upon biblical values. America is built on an idea, which is why Ronald Reagan said in the 80s, you can live in Japan, you'll never be a Japanese. You can live in France, you'll never be French. But you can live and come to America and believe in our way of life, and you can become an American, because it's not an ethnicity or a nationality, it's an idea. And we are straying so far from what not only Reagan envisioned, but what our founding fathers envisioned.
And just to piggyback off that, if I may, Dawkins has said, we're at CFI LA, which is Dawkins' building. He has said, I have said, I'm a cultural Christian. He's a cultural Christian. I don't buy the metaphysics, but I'm a cultural.
Great.
I'm a cultural Christian. Many of my friends abroad say that I'm the most American person they've met, and so I don't think it's a matter of what your metaphysics
are. Which is why President Jefferson wrote his own Bible and essentially took out the deification of Jesus. And Jefferson was way more interested in what is the philosophy, what are the moral teachings, what is the relevancy of Jesus Christ as a person.
Yeah.
Great, if that works for you, go for it. If you believe Jesus actually walked on water or he didn't walk on water, I don't say it's irrelevant because I don't want to offend Christians, but irrespective.
But it's irrelevant in terms of you being an American.
Exactly. It's irrelevant in terms of the cohesion of this country.
Right.
Again, I believe in diversity in the sense of e pluribus unum, out of many, one.
Right.
What we are now doing is out of one, many.
Right.
That is a moral and political perversion. So
it's an important distinction, an indispensable distinction.
So I envision a society of New York where Muslims and atheists and Jews and conservatives and liberals are contributing to the same country. But unfortunately, my vision of what the United States is so vastly different than the vision of someone like Zohar Mamdani, who did not come from our society, our culture, our way of life. And in his own words, he's a man of the third world who's trying to impart some of the most destructive elements, especially grievance culture, onto our society.
All right, and one of my last questions is, would you like to ask me any questions?
Was this an interesting interview?
It was very, very interesting. Yeah, I found it. Yeah, I did find it interesting, and I'm still, sometimes these ideas percolate in my head, and then I will think of something later and be like, wow.
Right. I actually will ask you one other question. As I said, I base my values on my religion, on my Judaism, and my Judaism, or one's Christianity, teaches that there is objective morality. Like there has always been this existential truth that has always existed and will always exist. If you're an atheist, it's a two-part question. Number one, where do you get your sense of ethics or morality from? Essentially, you would have to concede that it's moral relativism, because in the 1960s, to be a good, or maybe not the 60s, but let's say the 1940s, to be a good, upstanding American citizen, if an N-word is sitting in the back of the bus, call the cops. So Jews would always say that that's like a bad thing. If you're an atheist, why would you say that that's a bad thing?
Well, I'm not. Let's just go back. I'll answer the question directly. I think that's the question that and the problem of evil I'm asked most about. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's true what you said before about, how did you frame it? Objectively true. What did you say?
We believe that there is objective truth and there is objective morality. So something that was true 3,000 years ago continues to be true today. So how do I know that I should not rob or steal or whatever? It's because there was a Bible written 3,000 years ago that told me this. Atheists don't really have any sources.
Okay, hold on, got it. If that were true, then the New Testament would not have supplanted the Old Testament.
Well, that's not a question of theology. That's just a question of sociology and the historicity of Christianity.
No, but if there are objective truths in Deuteronomy or Leviticus or have you, then and the New Testament supplants those, then they weren't objective truths.
What exactly is Christianity supplanting? I don't think they're supplanting. I think they're complementing. Granted, I don't believe in their complements, but it's not like
so. If there's a contradiction between something in the New Testament and something in the Old Testament,
well, I think it'd be easier if you gave a practical example.
No, but I'm saying this would be a theoretical undergirding for the atheist
I see what you're
argument.
saying, which is why I, as a Jew, would say correct, which is why I don't believe in the divinity of Christianity.
Correct.
Because it obscures what I just said.
No,
There's fundamental
that's so.
truth.
I'm not saying that there's hypocrisy there. I'll answer your question directly. I think that we can rationally derive things that are true. I know at some point that we're going to have to smuggle in some first principle, human flourishing. I don't want to say utilitarianism, although I think a little bit of my thinking is utilitarian, a little bit of my thinking is deontological. I do believe in objective truth, and I do believe that you can reasonably, maybe not perfectly, almost definitely not perfectly, but we can get the big questions. It is wrong to torture small children for fun. We can figure out...
Can I just interject?
You
But
can
why?
say anything you want.
But why?
Well, again, because you have to smuggle in some first principle.
Okay, but what are you basing the first principle off? That's kind of my issue here.
But that's...
You're saying it's wrong to murder children,
Okay,
but-
well, I'll give
why?
you...
Because you feel bad for them?
No,
Who
no,
cares?
torture them for fun. So there are many ways to answer that question. Habermas has one of the, Jürgen Habermas, the German philosopher, has one way to answer that question. So you can just kind of look at it, I think of it, the way that helps me as a heuristic is like a little Ferris wheel. You have a bunch of first principles on a wheel that go around, and you take one off and you substitute, and you take one off and you substitute, and you kind of look for these meta first principles. If you're honest with yourself, which I try to be when I reason, to try to reason morally and think critically about these issues, we have to acknowledge that culture plays some role in this, society plays some role in this. Even if you look at interpretations of Christianity, I would argue that the hammer blows of modernity have kind of shaped those forces, much less so with Islam.
The implication thus far, though, has been that, correct me if I'm wrong, it is society that is shaping values. I take the approach, and religion takes the approach of, no, it's the values that shape society. You build a society off of
that's
those
also
first
true.
principles.
Yeah, I think that's also true. So it is something that I've perhaps spent too much time thinking about.
Okay.
Yeah, too much time. And I think the answer that I've come to at this stage in my life is that if you reason honestly about a thing, then you'll come to certain conclusions. For example, you ask about a practical example. Dental pain is bad. I would not want to inflict I wouldn't even want to inflict dental pain on someone I don't have any mortal enemies, although I'm sure some people consider me their mortal enemy. But I think a life that people can have cognitive liberty, people can have the freedom of choice, people can live by their own lights and determine their own lives.
You're describing Judaism to a T.
Well, I'm also defining or describing Enlightenment values, liberal values, what it's like to be in the West.
But Enlightenment values came, what, in the 1800s? The values from Judaism came from the inception of humanity.
Yeah, but you're asking about how I come to the moral conclusions I come to, and that would be how.
Fair answer.
So let's do this if it's okay.
Yeah, let's.
So
audience Q&A.
We have someone who disagrees with me, and I assume
presumably me too.
Yeah, since we have many similar beliefs, I'm assuming that he disagrees with you, and I'm always a big fan of allowing people. One of the things that Reed and I try to do is we try to get as much a disagreement as possible. And while I may push back on you or my guests, some of the things I don't believe in, but I just push them back to kind of test ideas.
Yeah, please.
So I think this is very generous of you to give me this opportunity.
Absolutely.
So I'm happy to hear your opinions. I guess when you make statements of facts that I don't think there's any evidence for, I think is what the issue is. Now, the issue with fact checking is it's always easier to spew out something than to fact check it. So I am going to have to rely on ChatGPT. But for example, you can ask a simple question like, do Muslims commit a disproportion of violent crimes in the US? You said this as if it was a fact that is well known and undisputed? And ChatGPT responded very authoritatively, no. Available evidence does not show that Muslims in the U.S. commit a disproportionate share of violent crimes once you look at the reliable data instead of stereotypes or media coverage. And
Can you give him a chance to respond, though?
of course, yeah. And so I'm not going to read all the evidence and links that it links, and I suppose that, and maybe this is what's difficult about this sort of format, is that you would have to investigate that evidence, but I just want to offer as one quick fact check, I don't think there's anything like a consensus or that this is obvious. I think this is, at the very least, an extremely controversial claim that that there's not immediate evidence for. And you said it like it was common sense.
Sure. So it's not that Muslims create disproportionate amount of crimes in the United States. I mean, if we want to go race or ethnicity, it's probably African Americans. I think African Americans, even though they're 13% of the population, commit 50% of the murder. So absolutely not. Muslims are not disproportionately more criminal oriented.
That was the claim you made earlier, though. That's the issue.
I thought it was Western Europe. I thought it was Western Europe.
I don't think it was about the United States.
You were talking about the United. Well,
Sure,
I think
so-
it might have gotten mixed up because originally it was Western Europe,
So
and
then
then
let
you
me
also
clarify.
said 1% in the United States, and you said, and that doesn't matter because X, X, Y, and Z.
Right.
But-
So the point of them being roughly 1%, I'm happy to be fact checked on the exact population of Muslims in the United States, is that the people who are most susceptible to radical Islam are Muslims. That's why we're concerned about the population.
Sorry, I didn't quite understand your answer.
I'm concerned about radical Islam, right? So the people in the United States who are most susceptible to becoming radical Islamists are not Jews, it's not blacks, it's other Muslims, which is why the only place in the United States that we've ever heard the calls for death to America have been in Muslim-majority cities like Dearborn, Michigan. That's what concerns me so much. It does not mean that Muslims are more innately radical. It does not mean that Muslims
I'm
are
not
more...
talking about innate either.
10 more seconds. It does not mean that Muslims are creating or committing disproportionately more crimes. And if I did say that,
Well,
I'm
there-
obviously wrong on that.
Well, there we go. That's what your argument essentially is that
in Western
Muslims
Europe, they
are...
certainly are.
Okay,
not in
so
the United States.
let's investigate that then.
I thought it was
Let's
Western
investigate
Europe.
that. So
Yeah.
I did fact check both. I also asked, do Muslims commit a disproportionate amount of violent crimes in Europe?
Well,
And
let's be
here's
clear.
what
Terrorist attack.
ChatGPT replied. There is no strong, simple evidence showing that Muslims as a religious group in Europe commit violent crime at a rate that is clearly disproportionate.
I mean, that is demonstrably not true. So, for example, can you identify any other religious group that in the last 50 years of European history in any country, whether it's France, whether it's the United Kingdom, that have beheaded others for drawing pictures of their prophet?
So that is one form of violence, but I think it's strange to elevate that form of violence as like a uniquely worse form of violence than, killing someone because you're jealous of their boyfriend or you know what I mean?
Well,
we're talking about statistically, we're talking about, does a person from this group, is this group more dangerous? And the statistics suggest that no, they're not. And by the way, I think it's interesting because I am against racism. I'm against anti-Semitism. That's why I was kind of shocked to hear you use a lot of the same exact talking points to criticize Muslims that anti-Semites use to criticize Jews, suggesting that, for example, even though they are a small portion of the country, that they exert some disproportionate amount of control, that they are, and the way you've described, I think they're very similar talking points, and I think they're both racism ultimately.
Sure. So it's not that Muslims have a disproportionate amount of control, it's that Muslims commit a disproportionate amount of terrorist attacks, which
Well,
again...
that's not true, though, because we just looked at, if you take violence as a whole, they are not committing more violence than any other ethnic group.
I guess now it's a question of semantics, because no one is disputing that there is domestic violence in any country, in any civilization, in human history, which is why we have very strong laws against domestic violence. What we are talking about is who are the most susceptible to acts of terror.
But
And
that's clearly not true because we just looked at who is committing the acts of violence. You're saying they're more susceptible, then that would lead to the idea that we would be able to see that. Then that violence would be committed, but that's not what's happening.
Let me answer your question with a question. If Muslims are not more susceptible to radical Islam, then who is?
I would say this. This is very simple. I thought, a piece of wisdom that I think we all should hold, which is we should judge a person by the content of their character and not their religion. I'm a believer in freedom. I believe that immigrants should be able to come to this country and they should have the freedom to have whatever values they want. I believe that's essential to the fabric of this country.
Can I ask a question on that? So
Yeah.
you just said that immigrants should be able to come into this country, have whatever values they want. If someone has the value of marrying a 6-year-old, should they be allowed to come into this country? Because that is an actual thing happening in Iraq right now. So if I wrote on my green card application that I totally intend on marrying and fucking a 6-year-old, would that be okay? Because that's their value. And again, there's not a high conjecture. This is like actually happening.
So you conflated two things. One of them would be a question of free speech. Should someone be able to say
I'm going to do it.
that,
I'm telling you as fact I'm going to do it. It's not speech, it's an action.
I'm explaining that what you did in your question. You conflated two things. Should freedom of speech says that someone should be able to say egregious things like what you suggested, like that is their belief. That is different. That is fundamentally different than the second thing you described, which is I am going to commit an actual crime, which of course, actual crimes should be persecuted. But actual crimes are different than values in general or religion in value. I believe in religious freedom. I believe that people should be allowed to be Jewish, and I believe people should be allowed to be Muslim. And I think you think, I guess it's shocking to me that you don't identify with the majority of Jewish voters who didn't vote for Donald Trump because they recognized that he was more anti-Semitic than his rival.
Well, first of all, I would disagree with the assertion that the majority of American Jews did not vote for Donald Trump because they recognize him as more anti-Semitic. But what I would say is, and I repeatedly said this throughout the conversation, is I'm not saying the majority of Muslims are like this. I've repeatedly and deliberately emphasized that publicly, that this is not the majority of Muslims.
But that is what you imply. That's what I was fact-checking. You said that Muslims were more violent. That implies...
No, that's not true. It's not that Muslims are more violent. It's, again, the point I keep making. Muslims are more susceptible to radical Islam, which is objectively the case. And if I'm wrong, then again, can you point? Let me just finish the point. So again, if it's not objectively the case, then what you need to do in order to affirm that statement is you need to point to another religious group that takes trucks to run down citizens celebrating a Christmas parade. You need to point to another religious group that shoots up a 10-year-old child celebrating Hanukkah on the beach in Sydney. And you need to point to another religious group that currently is beheading individuals who leave the faith. And if you can't do those things, which
so
you
here's
can't,
where the logical
fallacy
is.
Let me finish the point. If you can't point to another religious group that is doing that thing, then you must concede the point that it is not all Muslims, but it is radical Muslims, it is Islamists who are in fact doing that thing. And America is different. We don't want all values. We want American values. And if people don't want to subscribe...
That's a contradiction of terms, I would say.
It's not.
I would
let me
say
finish
that
the point.
America...
Let me finish
but you're saying a lot of things that I have to...
But I need to clarify the point, and then you can respond.
It's a contradiction of terms. You can't say America values freedom, but only my freedom. You either have freedom for everyone or you have freedom for no one.
That is categorically not true, and I would encourage you to read the Constitution, where we do have freedom, but it is within a legal framework of certain accepted
like
norms.
Religious freedom. So
Correct.
If you don't have religious freedom for everyone, you don't have religious freedom.
I guess, again, I'm trying to understand the question. What specific religious freedom have I advocated that Muslims should not have?
Okay, so answer that question directly.
You have suggested that Muslims are more dangerous.
But answer the question, though. What specific aspect of religious freedom have I said that Muslims in America should not have?
The right to be Muslim in America.
What does that mean, specifically? What does that mean, the right to be Muslim?
To identify with similar to any religion, religious freedom, to identify with that religion.
So if we were to replay this tape, you would hear me saying that Muslims don't have a right to identify as Muslim in America?
You said that Muslims commit a disproportionate amount of crime, and that's when I said that's false.
Okay.
We don't have evidence for that.
Okay, and what does that have to do with Muslims should not be allowed to be Muslims in America?
Because it was connected to all these, well, first of all, I think the claim needs to be assessed on its own merit.
Which we did.
Which is, so it's not fair and that is what I would say, it's racist to say about any specific religious group that there's not evidence that they're committing more crime, that they are committing more crime.
And I keep responding by saying objectively they are, and I keep giving examples.
But they're not. Objectively, that's what we proved. They're not.
Okay, hold on. I'm caught up in a thing. What do you mean by racist?
So I would say define racism as to contribute a negative property to a group of people based on their ethnicity or the color of their skin.
And do you think he's done that in this conversation?
I think he has, by suggesting that Muslim people are more violent when the statistics don't support that. And actually, the statistics suggest that immigrants in general in America and even in Europe commit less crimes.
Well, that's a different conversation.
I'm going to give you a chance to respond to the racism comment.
Sure. Again, for the manyth time, I'm not referring to the majority of Muslims. I keep saying, and again, if you have a counterpoint, I'd love to hear it, but it doesn't seem that you're providing it. Muslims are more susceptible to radical Islam. If they go to mosques or if they have a relationship with an imam who tells them, like in Dearborn, Michigan, like in Bondi Beach, like in Nice, France, that it is the highest calling of a Muslim to behead those who don't believe in your faith. It is the highest call of a Muslim to kill Jews and kill the infidels. That is what I'm really, really concerned about.
So
anyway,
the implication...
Let me finish. And let me be clear. If Jews were making that claim, if Christians were making that claim, if he was making that claim, I would call them out and I would perhaps be suspect of their religious teachings and ask, what is it about the religious teachings that are encouraging so many of that particular faith to be doing it? So to be clear,
they're not, though. Objectively, they're not. Objectively, people of that faith are not committing a disproportionate amount of violent crimes. That is the entire thing we're fact-checking.
So I think I'll just answer with this, otherwise we're just going in circles. You keep saying that they are not. So I'll ask you the question I asked you a couple minutes ago. If it's true that they are not, then what is the religious group that are in fact beheading infidels? What are in fact the religious group or groups that are murdering individuals who convert out of the religion? What are the religious groups that are shooting up Hanukkah parades and Christmas markets?
I think all racism is bad. All racist acts.
Agreed, but that's not an answer.
All right, hold on. I think we're getting caught up. This is my perception. We're getting caught up in a word trap. You're using the word violent. I also think it's a geographical trap. I think I could be totally wrong about this, but I thought you were talking about Western Europe, but I could be totally wrong if not. It's specifically Western Europe, not Eastern Europe. I think what you mean by violence, you're talking about just like, give me your money, no kaboom, and you're talking about terrorism.
Correct.
Well, and can I address what I feel like is the logical fallacy here?
But let's define our terms. Like,
I'm trying to address
everyone is
that.
susceptible to violence. I would agree with you, which is why we need strong laws. Not everyone is susceptible to terrorism.
I would say that one form of violence is not worse or better than another form of violence, and I would say that the logical fallacy you're making, you're like saying Muslims are more likely to commit, and then you name acts that are specifically defined by being perpetuated by Muslims, and that's the fallacy.
Well, what else should I do?
Okay, hold on.
I would say we should assess violence in general.
Let me ask you both a question to answer this question directly and succinctly. And the question to both of you is as following. Are Muslims more prone to commit violence? Is the first question. And the second one is implicit in that is than non-Muslims. And the second question is, are Muslims more prone to commit terrorism than insert religion of your choice? So let's go for the first one for you. Are Muslims more prone to commit violence? Yes.
If you are defining violence as, I think what you're describing violence as random acts of violence, then no, I would agree with you.
Okay, that is...
Okay, hold on, let him finish.
I just want to clarify, that is a contradiction of what you said earlier.
Hold on. Let him.
You made a specific claim.
Let him finish, and then you're going to get a chance.
Clear.
That was
okay. Hold on. Let him finish. So
here's the specific.
So let's go.
Here's
I'm
the
going to ask the
specific
question
claim.
again.
Muslims are far more susceptible to radical Islam than anybody else. I would find it an odd argument to make that Jews would be somehow, or a Christian would be somehow pressured or felt the appeal to fundamentally carry out terrorist attacks in the name of Allah while shouting Allah Akbar.
Okay.
Now, let me answer the first part of the question, though. As it pertains to violence, I agree with you. Everyone is susceptible to violence, which is why we need strong laws and strong governments that are tough on crime.
Okay.
So let's agree on this, that whether it is random acts or violence or terrorism, there should be strong laws for both.
Okay. So I just want to make sure that I understand. So the question is, what are Muslims more prone to commit violence? Your answer is no.
No, I don't see any data that
But the
supports
You did
question.
claim that earlier.
No. Wait. You have to let people finish.
Absolutely. I just want to say.
Okay. No. There's no saying anything. Period. You have to let him finish, and he has to let you finish.
Fair enough.
So I'm going to go back to the beginning again and ask you that question again. Are Muslims more prone to commit violence in general than non-Muslims?
No.
Okay. That's it.
Okay.
Second question. Are Muslims more prone to commit terrorism specifically than...
Emphatically. There have been, since 9/11, 45,000 attacks carried out by radical Muslims, often discriminating or targeting Muslims specifically. In fact, the biggest victims of Islamism are Muslims.
So the answer is yes.
Unquestionably.
Okay, so now I'm going to ask you the same questions.
Thank you.
And we're going to be quiet.
And that's, again, this is part of being a fellow atheist. It's hard. You might agree with the statement that it's harder to debunk things than to put out false information. So I am going to have to rely on ChatGPT.
The Gish Gallop.
Yes.
But let's answer the question directly.
And I asked the question directly for that reason. Are Muslims more likely to commit terrorism in the US?
That's not the question. Violence is the first question.
Well, the first question I thought we answered, and the answer was no. And
so you agree with him on that?
Yeah, of course. That was my entire point.
Okay, so then now let's go to the second question.
And now let's go to the second question. Right. Are Muslims more likely to commit terrorism in the U.S.?
Well, we didn't say U.S.
Okay, we didn't specify, but I am going to...
So that's a big distinction.
Okay, we can go there next, but do you want to know the answer to this question?
No, because it's irrelevant. The answer is probably not, although, again, there have been significant Muslim terrorist attacks in the United States. Are they disproportionately Muslims? I don't know,
we're not talking about
it's irrelevant.
We're just sticking to the questions, but we can
That's
talk
why
about other questions later.
Just to be clear, you did talk about the U.S., so that's why I addressed the U.S.
The majority of the conversation specifically was on Western Europe. I explicitly said in the conversation that America does not have the same...
You did bring up the U.S.
Okay,
and you specifically brought up Dearborn, Michigan.
Correct.
You
there's a tremendous...
lot about the U.S., so I think it was completely fair for me to...
Hang on. You're conflating many different things. I said there's a problem of domestic extremism when people in Dearborn, Michigan are saying death to America. I did not say that Muslims therefore have a disproportionate amount of terrorist attacks in the United States. So two things can be true at the same time. You just conflate all these things. You seem to say that terrorism, extremism, rhetoric, they're all kind of the same thing.
That's
I'm
what
saying
you're
that's objective.
doing.
No, I'm explicitly
hold
defining
my...
Give me 10 seconds. I'm explicitly stating that there's a difference. There is extremism, which is absolutely what we are seeing in Dearborn, Michigan. That does not mean there is terrorism. Why? Because as we said in our conversation, the United States, thankfully, does not import the same amount of radical Islamists that Western countries do. In Western countries, it is a tremendous problem. In the United States, not as much.
Okay, everybody needs to pause. So when I asked you the question, are Muslims more prone in general to commit violence, you said no.
But terrorism,
when I asked you that question, you said no. So you agreed on that. Then I asked the second question, are Muslims more prone to commit terrorism? There's no insert country of origin. Are Muslims more prone to commit terrorism? And you said yes. Now I'm going to ask you that same question. Are Muslims more prone to commit terrorism?
I would say that according to, and I think we should first answer in the U.S. because... Okay.
Are Muslims more prone to commit terrorism?
I would say no.
Okay.
I would say that that's a more complicated question. We're talking about statistically as what I wanted to look at the data, and that requires looking at a country. That's why I wanted to specify a country. So first, I thought we should just look at the data.
But that's moving. I think that's moving the goalposts a bit.
Okay. Well, why don't we first just address this question real quickly? Are Muslims more likely to commit terrorism in the U.S.?
I've already said no.
Well, I'm glad you agree. So I'm glad we agree that importing Muslims, that your biggest concern is not actually a threat to anyone in the U.S. because they're not more likely to commit terrorism and they're not more likely to commit crime. And I think that defeats your entire argument, which is that it's a problem that Muslims are coming to the U.S.
I think it's just frustrating hearing that question because I thought during our conversation, I was so explicitly clear that there's a difference between Muslims and Islamists. I say this repeatedly, and again, this is why I get a little frustrated. I have no problem whether you're a Muslim or a Christian or a Jew or an atheist coming into our country if you seek to assimilate, if you believe in Western values, if you believe in freedom of religion. Absolutely. I've been so clear for years and years.
What does that mean,
hang
though,
on.
assimilate?
I'm about to tell you.
Okay.
Assimilation means that you believe in democracy. You believe that people have the freedom to choose who they want to marry, who or what religion they want to believe in, that they believe that America is an exceptional country. If your name, as I said, is
I think that part of being an American is you don't have to believe that America is exceptional.
You have to finish.
If you want to come into this country, you should believe in those things, whether your name is Mahmoud Khalil or Jewy Jewstein. What I am making the distinction is Islamists, and if it's true of radical Jews or radical Christians, then I would include them too. But let's call a spade a spade. You don't have in nearly the same numbers of radical Christians and radical Jews who are applying to become citizens of the United States who fundamentally do not share American values.
And that's a claim I don't think you have evidence for. And I don't think the evidence would support that claim either.
Sure. Give me 10 more seconds. And it is objectively the case that in 1790, for example, President George Washington writes a letter to the largest Jewish community in the United States, to Newport, Rhode Island, and he says, as children of Abraham, we want you to come into this country because we have a shared belief in Judeo-Christian values. Because again, America is not merely a nation state, it's not merely a geographic area, but it is a land built upon ideas. And if you don't believe in those ideas, then we should not be obligated to take you. Go somewhere else.
Okay,
and I'm not just saying that about Muslims, I'm saying that about anyone.
All right, I want to give you an opportunity to respond to that.
I would say that your notion of America is actually what's fundamentally opposed to what is good about America, which is freedom. Freedom means freedom of religion. Specifically, we're talking about in the Bill of Rights, it specifically refers to freedom of religion. So you have just said that the only immigrants you think belong in America are of this specific subset. I would say that's a fundamentally anti-American value, and it's spelled out directly in the Bill of Rights.
So I think that's probably the point of contention. I believe that we should only be accepting immigrants who love this country, and you don't. And that's
I
fair,
think
but I'm glad we clarified those points.
And
Is
just to
that
be clear,
correct?
and I would say, yes, I would say that part of it being an American, I would say that it is un-American to say that we shouldn't allow people who don't like America, because guess what? That's what freedom of speech is. I think I should be allowed to sit on this stage without government interference and be able to say, I don't like America. And I think that's a fundamentally American value.
So irrespective of my disagreements with that statement, which I have many, that is fundamentally not what the Founding Fathers thought America was.
It absolutely is what is enshrined in the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights states we have the freedom to criticize the government. You are essentially saying you should not be allowed in the country if you criticize. You're critical of the government.
I just want to understand, in the Bill of Rights, when it says you have the freedom to criticize the government, who has the freedom? Because I think you're missing a key word.
The government should not.
Yeah, but
I
to
have
who?
to look up the language.
Can I tell you? Can I tell you? Americans.
This has been litigated.
Correct.
In court.
It has.
And courts have found that that is not true.
that is objectively not true. Government has, and the 250 years of
I guess we
American.
have to fact
Hang on,
check it.
before you fact check me, listen to the fact I'm going to say, and then you can fact check me. Wait, just
Well,
put
I
the
know
phone
it.
down. Just let me make the point.
Okay.
For 250 years, the United States has had immigration policy. It is the discretion of Congress, it is the discretion of the laws that we pass through our elected representatives to decide who we want in and who we don't want in. Sometimes those laws are good, sometimes those laws are not so good. So the Exclusion Acts of the 1920s and 30s were not good. They weren't good to the Chinese, they weren't good to the Irish, they weren't good to the Jews. However, it is still legal because it is the discretion of our constitutional republic to decide who we want in and who we don't want in. Non-Americans, Syrians, the Canadians, French, do not have a constitutional right to become citizens of the United States because of your bizarre interpretation of the Bill of Rights that everyone has the right to criticize the government. It's referring to American citizens,
It's not.
which is One second.
That's what I was going to fact check, but you stopped me.
Because I want to make the point first.
Well, you're making the point, but it's on a false premise.
Okay, if you truly believe that it is the constitutional right of non-Americans, wherever they are in the world, to come to America and become citizens, then I don't think there's much a debate to be had, because we can debate opinions, we can't debate facts.
Is that what you
That is
believe?
not a fact.
Is that what you believe?
I believe, so let's take a step back. We were talking about the values. What are American values? Regardless of the laws, what are...
But is that
First, let's answer that, and then we can do American
Is what
values.
he said what you believe? Is that a fair No, without the phone. Is that a fair characterization? Did he fairly characterize what you believe?
I don't know. I didn't quite take it in. If you want to repeat it,
Would you mind repeating it, please?
Sure. The Bill of Rights is referring to American citizens. So it seems to be that your argument is that anyone in the world has a constitutional right granted by the Bill of Rights to come to the United States of America, to be granted citizenship, because as the Bill of Rights says, we are not going to curtail your freedom of speech. And I am saying on a legal matter, on an objective, factual matter, no one has ever, in the course of human history, and certainly in the course of the 250 years of American democracy, has ever, not one, had the right to come into the United States. There's an application process. There's a line.
You mischaracterized my argument, and now you're
so tell
attacking
me
a straw man.
No. But so that's not correct what you said.
Yes.
Okay, so tell him what you believe.
I think that someone should not be discriminated against in their attempt to come into the United States because a fundamental American value is freedom of speech. So I think that is my argument.
Can I understand? When you say discriminate, you are saying that if the United States finds something objectionable about the applicant for citizenship and they denied that citizenship request, that would be discriminatory?
If it's in the context of speech. Now, freedom of speech doesn't mean like freedom to do a crime. Those are completely different issues. But I would say, for example, freedom of speech includes the right to say, I hate America.
So let me ask you,
without government interference. That's freedom of speech. That is fundamentally different than a crime or something like that.
So then let me ask you, just because I'm curious, forget about the legalities. I'm more curious about the idea behind it. Why specifically do you want someone who hates America to come to America? Forget about the legalities. I'm just curious why you want that.
I would say that it's a non-issue. And that I'd say that somebody who is, and the reason why I'm attacking the idea is because I think it's a false premise in the first place. But it's a non-issue. I don't think someone would come here if they didn't like something about America. But here's the issue, and this is why we're disentangling it. You want to limit who comes here based on an arbitrary set of criteria, which you describe as American values. And I would say that the ultimate American value is the freedom of expression. So,
okay, hold on.
Yes.
Did he characterize that correctly, what you believe?
I would only take issue when you say arbitrary, because I don't think it's arbitrary. I think it's 250 years of the American experience, 250 years of legalities, and what our founding fathers envisioned. And they would be horrified to know that young people today aggressively, actively, willingly, and deliberately want people who hate America. And to your point, when you say, I don't think it's happening, Mahmoud Khalil, the Columbia University student, has repeatedly called for the eradication of Western civilization. So I would say that is someone who does not deserve American citizenship. And you would say, actually, that's fundamental
freedom of speech. And I would say that's a fundamental freedom of speech.
Okay, so then I'm going to ask the same question to both of you, and I'm going to ask you first, if that's okay. What should be the top 3 criteria for denying immigration to the United States?
One, if they do believe in the eradication of Western civilization, I feel like that would be up there.
If they believe in the eradication of Western civilization.
Yep, they have to believe in American values. So those are things like free market capitalism. Those are things like freedom of speech.
I disagree with that.
Okay, hold on. We're going to come to you.
Things like freedom of speech, things like market capitalism, things like religious freedom, and then the third thing is they have to actually contribute to our country.
So denying immigration.
Correct. So, for example, I don't know the exact number, but the majority of Somalians living in Minnesota are on some form of government aid.
Federal assistance.
Yeah. So whether they're from Somalia or they're from Canada, it's irrelevant. If
you have to fact check that claim.
Go for
it.
it.
But I'm going to ask you the question. Let him finish.
If you are not able to contribute to our economy and to provide for yourself, but instead you will take government assistance, that is not a person we would want in our country.
So I'm going to ask you the same question I asked him. I asked him what should the top 3 criteria for denying immigration to the U.S. be. What is your response to that?
I would say that I would say there should really probably be only one criteria, which is, if you're currently wanted by a foreign government, and we know that, like for a crime, like if you're like on the lam, so to speak. Second is, if we have credible information you intend to commit a crime. And I would say that's, and honestly, I would keep it to those 2.
Can I ask, though, because you just said the intent to commit a crime, but that's sort of contradicted by your earlier assessment against freedom of speech. So I had said, if you're an immigrant coming from a third world country and you write on your visa application, your citizenship application, that I'm going to marry a 6-year-old and I'm going to fuck her and I'm going to have kids with her.
Well, that would be a crime.
But earlier you said, well...
That's not freedom of speech, that's a crime.
But earlier you said that was freedom of speech.
Okay, so freedom of speech, and the line between freedom of speech and committing a crime, as you know, can be sophisticated. So, for example, and courts have, litigated this, and sometimes it can be complex. So, for example, it is totally legal to say, I think we should have a different president. But if you say that in a violent way, it may or may not be legal. So you're asking about very specifically nuanced, if someone is saying in their visa application, I intend to commit a crime, whether that's speech or not, I think that would really rely very specifically on the specifics of it. But in general, we should not be discriminating based on
All right.
basic, general ideas that would be covered under freedom of speech.
We're running low on time. I just want to
I understand that.
I just want to ask a few final questions. I'll ask you the first question because I asked you the first question before. What is the number one idea that he expressed either in the conversation or subsequent in the conversation, either in my conversation with him or your conversation with him, that you have fundamental disagreements with? Like, what is if you can encapsulate that in a single sentence, what would it be?
The fundamental thing I disagree with is that a person who is Muslim is more dangerous than a person who is Jewish, a person who is an atheist. I would say that part of freedom of religion is respecting that.
Okay, just a
Yes,
sentence.
okay.
Do you believe that a person who is Muslim is more dangerous?
For the many, manyth times, no, that's not what I am saying. The point of contention I think you're having is when I say that Muslims are more susceptible to radical Islam. And again, if you want to disagree with that,
I think
then
you're using word tricks to basically say the same thing.
No, I'm not saying the same thing. You seem to be making the point that I am arguing that Muslims, by virtue of being born a Muslim, are inherently more dangerous. I'm saying that's not true. What I am saying is Muslims, by virtue of the fact that they go to mosques more than Jews, because Jews don't go to mosques. Muslims, by virtue of the fact that they have relationships with imams, because Christians don't have relationships with imams. Muslims, by virtue of the fact that they're more susceptible to the radical interpretations of the Quran, because you and I don't read the Quran, they objectively are more susceptible to radical. Okay, besides you, they're more susceptible to radical Islam. Yes, that is unquestionably what I am saying. What I am not saying, and this is where I'm getting a little frustrated here, what I am not saying is Muslims, by virtue of being born a Muslim, are inherently more dangerous or more inclined to terrorism. Anyone.
Violence was
yes.
word. Yeah.
Anyone who is in segregated communities, who has a radical cleric or religious leader, who is reading texts outside of modernist interpretations, anyone who does that is more susceptible to fundamentalism. And unfortunately, Muslims do that in greater numbers.
Okay. I don't think the statistics bear that out.
So I asked you what the number one thing you disagree with he said. He said that he does not believe that. What is your response to the fact that he does not believe, the number one thing which you disagree with him about, he claims that he does not believe what you think that he believes.
Are you
That's a good way of putting it.
Are you making a distinction between someone who is born Muslim and someone who identifies with the religion of Islam? Am I understanding that correctly?
No, again, I just literally on my show at PragerU, we just had Sheikh Khalid Al-Hayl. He is a Muslim, a practicing Muslim. He wore his Muslim dress. He's not an Islamist, which again, I take pains to draw a distinction between Muslims, the majority of whom, overwhelming majority of whom, are peaceful and law-abiding citizens, and then the people I actually care about because they're the ones coming for me and my kids and my family.
All right, hold on, let's pause. So I asked you the number one thing that he believes that you have a fundamental disagreement with. He said he does not believe that thing. What is something else, a fundamental disagreement you have, not a trivial one, but a fundamental thing that he said either in my conversation with you or your conversation? What is something that he said that you find either particularly odious or what is your fundamental in one single sentence?
I'm just checking my notes.
Okay.
I think there's a lot.
Just one sentence.
But I understand that. One of my fundamental disagreements is that voting Republican and voting for Donald Trump is anyway making the world safer for Jewish people. I think that the Republicans and the right-wing party are the by far more anti-Semitic party. And
okay, so that's in one sentence.
That is my disagreement. Okay.
I'd like you to answer that, please. Do you believe that?
Sure. Well, I'll put it this way. I was at the White House, what day is today? I was at the White House 2 nights ago, and certainly the released hostages who were with me at the White House last night thinking Donald Trump would certainly disagree with that assertion. What I would say is, as someone who registered as a Democrat the day I turned 18, as someone who only voted for Democrats, I was appalled when I was testifying in front of Congress, when I was lobbying on Capitol Hill. I was appalled that we could not find more than 5 or 6 Democratic members of Congress who were willing to say that they were going to defund universities that fundamentally violate the civil rights of Jewish students. I was appalled to see that dozens of elected members of Congress, all Democrats, were calling on Joe Biden to have an arms embargo against Israel while they were fighting Hamas. I was appalled to see elected leaders or candidates like Zohar Mamdani refusing to condemn calls for the globalization of the Intifada. And I wish I didn't have to vote for a Republican. I voted for a Republican because the Democrats refused to take this issue seriously.
Okay. So did that answer your?
Can I respond to it? Or?
100%. But first, did that? You asked him a direct question. Did his response answer your question directly?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And I would say that another fundamental disagreement we have is that you are conflating support for Israel.
Okay, so this is the third thing. This is your third disagreement you have.
Perhaps, yeah, but it's in response to what you just said, because essentially you're arguing that the Democrats don't support Israel as much, therefore they're more anti-Semitic. I would say
Let him finish. Let him go.
And I would say that those are fundamentally different issues that you can criticize.
Okay, hold on. Are you saying that the Democrats don't support Israel, therefore they're?
All of your criticisms of the Democrats being anti-Semitic essentially hinged on their support for Israel's war against Palestine.
I guess I'm correct. No, I guess I'm confused how refusing to defund Columbia University, that was found to have discriminated against Jewish American students, has anything to do with Israel.
I think we would have to fact check that, because I think what you're defining as discrimination is literally disagreement with Israel's war.
That is fundamentally untrue. I would like you
have to fact check it.
I will tell you right now. I would like you to please articulate how Jonathan Leader, who was physically assaulted by a student at Columbia University, had anything to do with Israel or free speech. I would like you to please articulate how Eden Yadigar at Columbia University, who was given death threats and stalked back to her dorm room, has anything to do with free speech or Israel. I would like you to please articulate how Yoav Segev, who was physically assaulted on Harvard Business School, has anything to do with free speech or Israel. I would like you to please articulate. Hang on, let me finish, because you made a point and I'm really unsure where that came from. I'd like you to please articulate how Yasmin Ohebsian from Tulane University, whose friend had their nose broken by another student over their support for Israel, has anything to do with free speech.
Hate crimes are bad. Hate crimes are bad no matter who they're against.
Correct. So again,
hate crimes are terrible.
Hang on.
Hate crimes are terrible if they're against Jewish people.
Hang on.
Hate crimes are terrible if they're against Muslim
yes, agreed.
people.
Hate crimes are bad. So I guess I'm curious.
Okay,
I guess I'm curious why you just said that defunding the universities is really because they don't support Israel, when I'm saying it has literally nothing to do with Israel and has everything to do with American Jewish students being physically assaulted and discriminated against on their campuses.
And you're saying those crimes weren't persecuted and investigated?
No, they were not.
Prosecuted.
No,
you're right.
that's literally my point.
I did say persecuted.
No.
Okay, and that's the thing I wanted to fact check.
I literally sued Harvard University because the Joe Biden administration refused to prosecute Harvard. Trust me, this is my lane. I know this.
Yes, you got a big platform with the Republicans to make this point.
Correct. You want to know why? Because the Democrats refused to platform us. I went to the Democratic Convention and I said, don't have me speak because I'm a MAGA fascist. I gave them a list of a dozen young Jewish progressive students on college campuses. And I said, I will connect you with any one of them, have them speak about anti-Semitism for 2 minutes. And you know what the Democratic National Convention said? No.
I would have to... Again, I'm sorry, I was in the middle of fact-checking
so
the previous...
So stop that. Just listen to what I'm saying right now.
We have to.
Okay, can you respond to the point I just said?
Because you make bold claims.
You're the one who made bold claims by saying that college campuses discriminating Jewish students actually has to do with free speech in Israel. And I literally just said, then how do you explain the physical assaults against Jewish students? So I'd actually put your phone down for a second, and I'd like you to respond to the physical assaults against American Jewish students and how that has anything to do with Israel.
And I would say hate crimes are bad.
Okay, great, but that's not responding to my claim. You literally said to my point that the Democratic Party refused to defund American universities. You said, well, it has to do with speech in Israel. And I said, no, it doesn't. It has to do with people being physically assaulted. What's your response to that? Hate crimes are bad. Yeah, no shit. Why is it that the Democratic Party refused to defund universities?
Answer that directly.
You are suggesting that a university should be defunded if a hate crime takes place on the campus?
Is that what you're suggesting?
Let me be absolutely clear.
That seems like
hold on. Tell him what you're suggesting.
In the 1950s, President Dwight Eisenhower told schools in response to Brown v. Board of Education, if you do not integrate blacks into your schools, we will cut off all federal funding. In 2014, Barack Obama told all colleges, if you do not combat sexual assault, we will defund all of your universities. Why? Because when universities are complicit
that's what I was saying.
Hang on,
I was clarifying your claim.
Let him finish.
If that's the phone.
we need to fact check.
Let him finish.
Just
Go ahead.
listen to me without the phone for like 10 seconds. This is where I'm getting
Well,
frustrated.
that's what
Just
we need to
listen.
fact check, then.
What specifically are you fact checking here?
That Harvard University failed to protect.
I am
the victims.
telling you as someone who was at Harvard. Why don't you just listen to me instead of going on ChatGPT? My friend,
Because I don't believe you and I disagree with you. That's a fundamental.
So when you say you disagree with me, Yoav Sega was physically assaulted at Harvard Business School. What specifically do you disagree with on that?
And was that crime investigated?
By Harvard? No.
And is that a different policy than when normally happens to students who are attacked?
Yes.
Okay,
That's
so
why we sued them.
So let's do a hypothetical. Let's accept by fiat that what he is saying is true.
Yeah.
We're going to run with it. And in 2 minutes, whoever wants to, in 2 minutes, just hypothetical, we can revert back. But we're going to assume that that is true. What do you think the appropriate response should be?
It's an interesting question. I think all universities have a responsibility to take racism against any of their students, racism in any form, whether they're Jewish, whether they're Muslim. I think they have a responsibility to take that seriously. And so I think those are serious claims, and that's why I wanted to look into them.
Okay, so let's accept that by fiat as true. Okay, maybe the Jewish thing is too laden. Let's say there were black students. So every name that you said, all the people who are Jewish, forget about all of them, and we're going to insert African Americans in there. What do you think the appropriate response should be?
I guess it should be the same for anybody who suffers a hate crime, I would say.
Be what?
Well, I guess I'm not an expert, but I think it's something along the lines of investigating the crime, figuring it out. Yes.
Investigate to do what? They've investigated and they said, yep, Harvard violated the civil rights of black students. Now what? Because, by the way, the Department of Justice has already conclusively determined that Harvard and Columbia and Yale and elsewhere have actually violated the civil rights of Jewish students. So I guess I'm curious why, even after the fact that the federal government has already ascertained that they violated the civil rights in Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, why the Democratic Party insists that they should not be penalized in any meaningful way. And I'm also curious what that has to do with Israel.
So I guess I would say that here's what this says.
Forget what it says. What do you think? Let's say this happens to black students pretty egregiously. What should, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you mentioned defunding.
Yes. In the same way Barack Obama told universities that had systemic sexual assault, we will defund all of your universities unless you protect women.
Okay.
And the Democrat Party, as they should, lauded and applauded that. I'm unclear as to why the Democratic Party, when Donald Trump said the exact same thing on the campaign trail, refused to support American Jewish students. And again, I'm also curious where you got this bizarre notion that it had anything to do with Israel.
Well, because you mentioned the hostages. That was about Israel. That was about Israel.
Forget about it.
As it pertains to college campuses, I said the Democratic Party won't defund it. And you said, well, that has to do with free speech in Israel. And I said, really, where did you get that from? So I'm actually curious where you got that from.
Let's go to the first thing first, then we'll
Wait,
go to the Israel thing.
can I hear your answer? Where did you get that from, that it has to do with free speech in Israel?
Because
campuses.
there was a movement on these campuses to divest from Israel because there was a war going on in which they felt they were committing war crimes.
And what, again, you're not answering the question. What does that have to do with the civil rights violations of American Jewish students? What is the connection between Israel and the violation of American Jewish students on college campuses facilitated by their universities?
I would have to read into the specifics.
So then why did you make the claim?
Because I believe that this is what's being conflated. I think there was a protest.
But you just said you don't know. So how can you say it's conflated if you don't know what's being conflated? This is why I get so frustrated.
This is what's frustrating to me is that there was a protest movement on these campuses to stop supporting Israel while it was committing war crimes against a vulnerable population of Palestinian people, killing men, women, and children. And that movement was violently attacked and crushed and suppressed. And
it's interesting how quick you are. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
And there was calls to and that was conflated with anti-Semitism. So that is where I'm coming from.
I find it so interesting how quick you are to characterize the violent suppression of these protests, yet when I tell you about the actual violent attacks against Jewish students, well, I have to fact check you. Don't you find that interesting?
You can fact check me.
No, I'm not going to fact check you. I'm just saying, don't you find it interesting how you're so quick to say that the encampment protesters were violently subjugated by their universities? Yet when I tell you, hang on.
Yeah, we have different claims. That's the point. We fact check the other person.
Let me finish. Yet when I say that Jewish American students were physically assaulted, oh, I don't believe you have to. It's just interesting how so quick you are to side with the university. I never doubted for a second. You literally did. You said, roll the tape. You literally said, I don't believe you. That is a direct quote. I do not believe you. You said that 3 minutes ago. So again, I just find it interesting that you're so quick to not believe that.
check that
no,
Harvard
hang
didn't
on,
take it seriously.
hang on. You said, you have to admit it, did you not say, and I quote, I don't believe you? And if you're going to say no, then we have to absolutely rewatch the tape, because you said it 3 minutes ago.
What I said was that
I don't believe you.
And
That's
I believe
what you
I
said.
said this many times.
You said, I don't believe you.
all hate crimes are bad.
Okay, you said that too.
And should be investigated.
Let me ask you a very straightforward question.
All hate
Great.
crimes.
Okay, let me ask you a very straightforward question. Did you not say, and I quote, I don't believe you? Did you say that?
I actually don't remember.
Okay, so let me
apologize.
educate you. You did. So I just find it interesting that when I make the claim that Jewish American students were physically assaulted, I'm not going to believe you. I have to go check.
I never said I don't believe you that.
Okay, when you guys do editing,
Okay.
make sure you find the clip and send it to me when you said, and I quote, I don't believe you, because you said it. So again, I find it fascinating that
I
someone
believe what
who
I
is
said
so-
over and over
who is
again
so-
is I am against
Okay.
hate crimes.
Great.
And that hate crimes should be taken
Great.
seriously.
I just find it so interesting how someone who, by your own admission, is so uneducated on this topic is willing to make grandiose statements that it has anything to do with free speech, it had anything to do with Israel.
How many
And I've clearly made the
Palestinians have
point.
been killed
What
since
does,
October
what does
7th?
Israel and
That's
Palestine? Hang on,
a
let me answer.
separate
I'll answer.
issue.
What does Israel and Palestine have anything to do
Well,
with
because
American
you accused
Jewish
me
students?
of being, well, you brought up the hostages.
In a totally different point. I'm referring
In a
to
totally
American
different point.
Jewish students having their civil rights
Also,
violations.
The defunding of the universities was brought up in the context of protests.
No, they weren't. You
Yes,
brought
they-
that up. They were brought up in the context of my friends Jonathan Leder and Edom Yadigar and Yermizan Hezbollah and myself and Yoav Segev being physically assaulted. And then you, in order to deflect for your lack of education on the topic, went to
You're
Israel-Palestine.
accusing me of being uneducated on the topic.
You said
and that-
yourself you didn't know. I'm
said
not accusing you.
I said I would have to look more specifically
Correct.
in the details
Why do you have
of
to
a
look more
specific-
specifically into it? Because you don't know.
Okay.
So I would encourage you in the future, if you don't know enough about the topic, don't make grandiose statements. And
Okay,
I find it
okay.
absurd.
If you want,
I find it
so
absurd that
you're
you-
the
hang
one
on.
who made false. By the way, the reason I'm up here is you're the one who made false statements.
Mm-hmm.
So do not come at me saying that I don't know what I'm talking about. You are the one who made objectively false statements that I had to fact check.
So
do not come at me suggesting that I'm ignorant on this
So
topic.
I'm glad you used ChatGPT as your fact-checking source.
Well,
I've
and I addressed that right at the top, which is that it's easier to make a false claim than to disprove it.
Okay,
I was forced to do
all right,
so.
so
I've
I'm
already
gonna-
shown
I'm
why.
gonna-
Is it? Wait, let me.
all right,
One last point, then I'll shut up. I've already demonstrated why it was not a false claim that I made. And second of all,
No, you did not.
Okay.
Okay,
And
hold-
by your
so-
own admission, your own admission, you yourself said you don't know enough about the topic, which is why I get incredibly frustrated when I have lived personal experiences, well documented, both whether it's video, whether it's in our legal cases, whether it's in social media and speeches that we have all given on political campaigns, that American Jewish students were physically assaulted. And the response on the left, this is exactly why I left the left. The response on the left is either we don't believe you, or it has to do with Israel-Gaza. And I'm emphatically saying this has nothing to do with the Middle East. It has nothing to do with free speech. It has nothing to do with anti-Zionism. It has to do with universities on college campuses fundamentally violating Title VI of the Civil Rights Act and the entirety of the Democratic Party saying we do not want to penalize the universities for doing that.
Okay,
That is
so,
a major problem.
So I'm gonna say, so I think that there are two separate distinct claims that are going on here. The first, and push back on me, but this is, you tell me what you think. The first claim is that Jewish Harvard students were physically assaulted. I think that's the first claim.
And I never dispute.
No. Forget about disputing.
Yes.
I think that's the first claim.
yeah, I mean, other
Okay.
students at other campuses
We're going to
as well, for sure. Yes.
slowly break it down.
Yes.
And the second claim is Harvard did not take those physical assaults seriously.
Correct. They did not investigate or cooperate with the DA of Cambridge.
Okay, but would you agree that those are the two claims we're discussing?
Two of many claims, but sure.
Right, but those are those are fundamental
Yep.
claims that we need before we
Yes,
talk
sure.
about defunding or anything else. Does the first claim that the students for Harvard were physically assaulted, does that need to be, does that require a fact check from you?
You can fact check it right now. The Department
No,
of Justice already investigated.
I believe that
Yes,
hate
yes or
crimes
no?
happen, and
Okay.
and
So you agree with claim one?
I'm not disputing it.
Okay. What about claim two? And again, there are other claims. I just want to make sure that, to my mind, these are the fundamental claims before we can talk about anything else. Harvard didn't take those physical assaults seriously. Do you agree with that?
That is what I would want to fact check and look into.
You can do it right now. The Department of Justice already investigated Harvard University along with the Department of Education. They had found that Harvard was complicit in the civil rights violations of Jewish students. And in fact, you can read, last point, you can read the Harvard Anti-Semitism Task Force report. You can read Harvard's own report where they acknowledge that they normalized the system of anti-Semitism. They themselves said it.
So two things.
It's a 200-page report, so don't
So
chat
that
GPT
was
it,
just,
read
I'll
the
just
whole
say
thing.
that was his specialty. I have not spent a lot of time on that specific case, in which case I would probably have more to say about it. You're right. That specific incident, I do not know enough about. But the reason I'm up here is because I fact-checked what I felt like were other much broader claims that I thought were easily disputed.
We can go.
So
We can go into those later. I'm
Yes.
happy to go into those later.
And
That's
I
why-
would have to recuse myself from this specific thing that you clearly have.
Okay,
I have had no prep.
We can go into all
you're
of
the one
this
who brought
stuff.
up the claim.
We can go into this stuff later. I just
Well-
want to make sure those first two claims, we can at least agree on what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay. So now we're going to talk about an inference from that. One inference from that, and Rita's pulled up a fact check from ChatGPT. You have mentioned, and I don't
I
want
don't
to.
like this ChatGPT
Oh,
as,
whatever.
as
I mean,
divine.
no.
It's
I'm not saying
not
it's
the best-
divine. I'm saying that this is.
It's the best
this
of the
is
worst
what he
circumstances. We don't
considers
have
to be-
research teams
This
on
is
with
what
us right
he
now.
considers to be his idea of a fact check.
That is a damning indictment on scholarship in America today. But
No,
I
it's a
digress.
damning
Okay,
indictment
hold
on
on.
time.
Okay, hold on. Okay, so I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you said that you think the university should be defunded given claim 1 and claim 2.
And many other claims.
And
but
many
yes.
other claims. If it were not Jewish students, if they were black students, would you think that Harvard should be defunded? Or
That's a-
whatever university.
I think that's a very valid and interesting question. And I think on this specific question about whether or not Harvard did a good enough job protecting Jewish students, I think I would have to recuse myself for needing to do more research.
No,
on this
forget about
specific
Jewish
question.
students, black students.
I don't know, and that's the answer. That's the answer. I don't know. I don't know if the answer. I don't know if defunding it would help.
So
it.
can I answer? If a black student or black students or Muslim students or gay students are being discriminated against and having their civil rights violated by their universities, unquestionably not a penny of American taxpayer money should be going to those universities. And I find it surprising that the Democratic Party and the left, which are all about the emancipation of women and gays and Muslims and blacks, do not seem to support the same hypothesis when it comes to Jewish students. So I don't need to do research because I know that if any university were to discriminate against any student, they have forfeited the right to American taxpayer funding.
I think that's a reasonable argument. I disagree that Muslims commit more crimes, and that was the big thing. That's the big reason I'm up here.
Okay. I don't think you were claiming they commit
I was
more
not claiming
crimes.
that. I think we've
do
been through
think
this.
you were
So
claiming
I'll say
that,
it one last time, and I'm repeating myself at this point.
You're making I think, a trivial distinction between Muslims and Islamists to hide what.
So are you saying there is no distinction? That would be incredibly
What is your
Islamophobic.
distinction? It's
I just said.
Well, that's another conversation. All right, let's end with that. We'll do this is the last one we'll do. Tell me, how do you define Islamism? How do you define Muslim? How do you define just basics so that we're all on the same page of what we're talking about?
I am willing to receive those definitions. But I don't have them.
But you just said I'm the one who's not making any trivial distinction. So when we say what is the distinction, you can't say, well, I don't know, because you
To
just said
me,
you
it
disagree with my
sounded
distinction.
like you were conflating them. So that's why I'm
Right.
saying I'm willing to receive
So
what
hang
your
on, when you say
definition is.
I'm conflating them, I say, okay, well, what is the them? And then you say, well, I can't define it. I don't know.
Muslims.
No. What is the difference between an
distinction.
Islamist and the
Muslims
Muslims?
and
Correct. So what is the
Islamists.
difference? Because you say I'm conflating them. So what's the difference then?
I'm saying I don't understand what you're
So
saying.
then
the
how can I
difference is.
possibly be conflating them if you don't know what the
Maybe I
definitions
used
are?
A slightly incorrect word. I'm saying I don't understand the differentiation. you're making.
So then let me tell you, which we did in the conversation.
that's why I said I'm
not all
welcome.
Muslims are Islamists, but all Islamists are Muslims. The majority of Muslims are peaceful, law-abiding citizens who have freedom of speech, who have
Then
freedom.
what is an Islamist?
I'm about
Let
to tell
him
you.
finish, let him
Come
finish.
on. Who fundamentally believe, I'll take the ones who live in America, who believe in American values, who believe in the rule of law, who believe in religious freedom. Islamists are people who, listen to their own words, don't believe in any of those things. They believe in the subjugation of the infidel in favor of Islam. And they will use power, they will use force, they will use the sword in order to dominate the West, in order to bring about the caliphate. Again, hang on.
the way I'm receiving this
Give me
definition-
10
okay,
seconds,
go
come on,
ahead.
please. Don't take my word for it. That's literally ISIS's mantra. That is literally Hamas's mantra. That is
So the way
Hezbollah's
I'm-
mantra.
so the way I'm
I don't
receiving
care
this
about
definition-
I don't care about the peaceful, law-abiding Muslims who I want more of them in this country. What I do not want are Islamists. And that is true of any religion. Any extremist, I do not want you in this country. And I think that's where we have a difference of opinion.
I think that is where we have a difference of opinion, because I think if you're an Orthodox Jew, I think you should be allowed in this country, and I don't think the government should be allowed to decry you as an extremist.
Are you claiming Orthodox Jews should not be allowed in the country? No, I'm like
Wait, that
is
Orthodox Jews should not be allowed in the
Yeah.
country? What specifically? Let me rephrase. I'm saying Islamists should not be allowed in the country because they commit terrorist attacks. You're saying, well, by that...
I'm saying people who commit terrorist attacks shouldn't be allowed in the country. Absolutely.
Great. So we're in agreement. No one who commits terrorist attacks should be allowed into the country. Done. Great. Glad we agree.
And that is not dependent on your race or ethnicity.
I have said that so many times. I agree with you.
I think you've conflated them because you keep...
I specifically said whether your name was Mahmoud Khalil or Jewy Justine, because remember, you laughed. Regardless of your religion, anyone who does not believe in American values or has committed acts of terrorism, you should not be allowed in this country.
All right, let's try these last 2 claims, and I'm going to go to you first. So,
I got to go home, my God.
all right, we're almost done.
2 more.
You have 2
Well, I just
couple
want to
minutes.
stop and say
We have a couple minutes. Oh, okay.
And
All
I know
right.
this is exhausting, and
I appreciate it.
And I do want to say I do respect you.
Thank you very much. The feeling is mutual.
Okay.
We got heated because we believe passionately on our side, which is a very, very good
And
thing.
very few people want to have these conversations. And
Yes.
So,
Yes. No, I think we need to have. Obviously, I should lower, my tone and my
I
emotions.
should too, and
but
I think we both respect each other. At
yes,
the end
absolutely.
Of
So I apologize if I came off as rude or condescending.
And
but
I don't think you
absolutely
did,
this
and I
was-
apologize as
Appreciate
well.
it. Thank you very
all
much.
right, guys, thanks.
Okay.
right,
the
Reed,
day.
it's
You're
a
ready.
wrap.
You're ready to end things, Peter. This is the end.
All right.
Hey,
all
don't
right.
just leave.
All right. I was going to say, because I know you want to go. All right. So I'll say.
We've been
go
doing this for
back.
like 2 fucking hours.
No, go back.
I'm not trying to end things. I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah.
I did.
Okay. I
Yes, yes.
appreciate it.
All right, I'll go
appreciate it.
back. So I'm glad that you came up and
And I really appreciate the invitation. I think that was
course.
incredibly generous.
yeah, of course. I mean, I sincerely do want people who disagree with me. As I told you, I've had 2 Islamists on the show. We have 2 more scheduled. Really have. They're online. You can watch the show. I want people who disagree with me. I want people, and it's very difficult. So I really appreciate the fact that you came up and you took the ideas to task, and I really appreciate the fact that you took the time. I know it's late. We've been here forever. And you answered those questions. Now, you didn't have any idea that this was going to happen, right?
No, but it's great. I'm happy to have done that.
Yeah, so I really
And
appreciate
I didn't have
that.
any idea either, so I
You didn't have,
appreciate
and
it.
I didn't tell you either. I didn't even tell Reed. So anyway.
And Reed's been manning
Or
3
Reed.
cameras.
Yeah, Reed's
Yes.
been doing an awesome job. So thanks, Reed. And thanks to you guys. I appreciate
Okay,
it, man. Thanks
thank
a lot.
you.
Thanks a
And
lot,
I just
bro.
want to say thank you, and I respect both of you, and I genuinely did learn from this conversation, and I hope that feeling is mutual. So.
Amen.
Right on.
Cool.
Cheers.
Thank you guys.